So, remnants of the former Xuantian sect still survive in this world. The one who fled to the Purple Heaven sect, who exactly is it? A cultivator from the Five Elders Association murmured to himself in a low voice. As he spoke, his gaze shifted toward Zhou Qingong. Confirming this matter is of great importance to our Five Elders Association. Although this is merely a transaction, we still owe you our gratitude, Taoist friend. As for the contribution points that need to be laundered. He paused briefly before continuing, within a month, more than 10 cultivators with different identities will personally bring secure, standardized spirit stones to you. All you need to do is transfer the contribution points to them. Sensing that Zhou Qingong might have concerns, he added, these cultivators all use false identities that our Five Elders Association has carefully crafted over the years. Shortly after the transaction is completed, they will all perish due to various accidents. There will be no risk of being traced or exposed. With the secret phrases for their rendezvous carefully explained, the transaction between the two parties was essentially complete. I look forward to our future cooperation. As they parted ways, the black-robed cultivator from the Five Elders Association said to Zhou Qingong in a slow, deliberate tone. Likewise, Zhou Qingong cupped his hands and replied with a smile before turning and leaving. It wasn't until Zhou Qingong's figure disappeared beyond the horizon that the cultivator from the Five Elders Association furrowed his brows and muttered, Zhou Qing'ang, Li Fan. What are their true identities? We've investigated for so long and still haven't found a single useful clue. Does the heaven-suppressing society truly exist? Or is it just a fabrication by certain cultivators within the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, using the intelligence they possess as leverage to exchange for resources? After pondering for a while, he chuckled in amusement. Either way, as long as they provide us with intelligence, it's enough. The more chaos within the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, the better. The figure of the Five Elders Association cultivator gradually faded until he completely disappeared into the air. Meanwhile, Zhou Qingong, having completed the transaction, returned to Kongyan Immortal City as if nothing had happened. Spending such a vast amount of contribution points, he had already prepared for the possibility of his information being exposed. But it didn't matter. At most, the Five Elders Association might deduce that Li Fan, the cultivator from the Heavenly Mechanism sect, was also a member of the Heaven-Suppressing Society. They might even suspect that his identity as an ancient cultivator was merely a disguise. But as for Li Fan's true identity, they would never be able to guess it. After all, who would have thought that the cultivator making waves in the Xuanwang realm was, in reality, just a mere mortal from a small outer world? Before long, all truths would be buried beneath the catastrophe of world destruction. Even if someone wanted to investigate, there would be no way to do so. The river of time surged forward, and everything proceeded steadily, step by step. The number of revived cultivators from the Medicine King sect had now reached 346, including Lu San. Although the vast majority were at the Foundation Establishment and Golden Core stages, with only 5 at the Nascent Soul stage, when united, they still formed a formidable force. More importantly, as time passed, the effects of the bloodline transmission ritual became increasingly apparent. Their reverence for Li Fan grew stronger by the day. Moreover, Li Fan constantly reinforced their beliefs through indoctrination, repeatedly emphasizing the goal of reviving the Medicine King sect. Gradually, their gazes toward him began to reveal a near-fanatical devotion. Li Fan was convinced that soon, even if he ordered them to sacrifice their lives for the Medicine King sect, they would do so without hesitation. The bloodline transmission ritual is truly extraordinary. Li Fan was extremely satisfied with the effects of this divine technique. Of course, its remarkable effectiveness was largely built upon his absolute dominance and strength. When he had attempted to use the ritual on a soul transformation cultivator, it had completely failed. Even among the 5 nascent soul cultivators, converting them had been extremely difficult. It was only with Lu San's assistance that the process had barely succeeded. Now that he had enough manpower, Li Fan gradually ceased the revival of further Medicine King sect cultivators. Li Fan knew that the 10,000 Immortal Alliance monitored the number of cultivators in each state. The sudden increase of more than 300 cultivators was still within a reasonable range, given the vast population of cultivators in Kongyan Sea. However, any further increase might arouse suspicion and lead to an investigation, so he decided to hold off for now. After inquiring with Lu San about the detailed information regarding the still slumbering Dao Integration Elder, Li Fan used the second True Temptation fruit. He awakened a Dao Integration cultivator named Fang Ziji. This man was an elder of the Medicine King sect, specializing in artifact refinement. The small Medicine King cauldrons used by the disciples were crafted by him. However, Fang Ziji was not originally a cultivator of the Medicine King sect. Years ago, while being pursued and near death, he was saved by Lu Rushan. To repay this kindness and to escape from his enemies, he chose to remain in the Medicine King sect as a guest elder. Fang Ziji had little emotional attachment to the Medicine King sect, but he was deeply interested in the refinement method of the sect's treasured divine artifact, the Medicine King True Cauldron. Back then, Lu Rushan had promised to lend him the Medicine King True Cauldron for research, which convinced him to stay. Li Fan used the True Temptation fruit to alter Fang Ziji's perception. Now, in Fang Ziji's revised memories, his time in the Medicine King sect was mostly distant from the other disciples. Only Lu Yihang, who was actually Li Fan, constantly pestered him every day. He had practically watched Li Fan grow up and had already come to regard him as half a son. Along with absolute trust in Li Fan's commands, when the effects of the True Temptation fruit faded and Fang Ziji awoke. After listening to Li Fan's explanation, he quickly understood the current situation. It seems that the 10,000 Immortal Alliance is even more sinister than the 10 great immortal sects of back then, Fang Ziji muttered, his eyes darkening. Sect Master, you should have awakened me earlier, he said with a trace of reproach in his tone. Li Fan shook his head slightly and explained, at the time, I wanted to secure Longevity Valley as a foothold first, so I awakened Elder Lu first. When I considered awakening you next, I learned that the 10,000 Immortal Alliance was monitoring the number of cultivators in each state. At the time, I wasn't sure what was going on, so I held off for safety reasons. Now that I understand the situation, it seems to be related to the new cultivation method of today's cultivators. However, you remain unaffected, so I decided to awaken you. Fang Ziji nodded slightly, accepting Li Fan's explanation. The monitoring of cultivator numbers might be connected to the immortal ruins, he said after a moment, as if recalling something. Oh, Li Fan looked at him curiously. During my travels in the past, I once heard by chance that the 10 great immortal sects had deployed a formation covering the entire Xuanwang realm, Fang Ziji said, lost in thought. A formation like a blade hanging over all living beings. From the moment they are born, regardless of their cultivation level or race, they are all caught within it. This formation not only allows the sects to easily control all cultivators in the world but also gathers the power of all living beings to pierce through the endless void, locking onto the coordinates of other cultivation worlds. It can even establish cross-realm pathways to launch invasions. Fang Ziji slowly recounted. At this moment, Lu San interjected. Really? Such a formidable formation, why have I never heard of it? He scrutinized Fang Ziji, his gaze full of skepticism. Fang Ziji snorted coldly. You're just a mere servant, never having ventured far beyond the territory of the Medicine King sect in your entire life. How could you possibly compare to someone like me, who has traveled across the world? Besides, do you even know the kinds of people I associated with back in the day? Almost all of them were true disciples of the 10 great immortal sects. It's no surprise that I learned such secrets, Fang Ziji said proudly. Being called a servant, Lu San didn't get angry. Instead, he retorted sarcastically, oh, if you're so incredible, then why didn't anyone come to your aid when you were being hunted down? You only survived thanks to the old sect master. Fang Ziji's expression changed, and he retorted indignantly, the Heavenly Sword sect had issued a kill order, what could I do against that? The fact that I survived at all was already a stroke of great fortune. If it had been you, you'd have long since turned into a pile of bones. Seeing that the argument was about to escalate, Li Fan quickly spoke up to interrupt them. Master Fang, do you know the name of that formation? Li Fan asked. I do not, Fang Ziji shook his head. Back then, a direct disciple of the Supreme Sect mentioned it in passing with a sigh. 1. He also said that if the Grand Formation hadn't been damaged, the situation wouldn't have deteriorated to this extent. Hearing this, Li Fan slowly nodded. A blade hanging over all beings, capable of instantly stripping cultivators of their lives. This sounds strikingly similar to the Tianquan spirit-locking formation I encountered in my past life. By harnessing the power of all living beings, it locks onto other cultivation realms. My previous speculation that the Xuanwang realm uses it to anchor a rope into the distant void now seems to be correct. From what I can tell, the 10,000 Immortal Alliance seems to have restored part of the formation's functionality but not entirely. And this formation was definitely not constructed by the 10 great immortal sects, it originates from the much older era of the Xuantian sect. As he pondered, Li Fan gradually connected all the clues together. Now, with the aid of a Dao integration cultivator, he proceeded with the relocation plan. The people stranded on the island, including the now awakened Medicine King sect cultivators, were escorted by Lu San and Fang Ziji aboard the Samantabhadra true boat, setting off toward Longevity Valley ahead of him. I still have some unfinished business in Kongyan Sea, I'll catch up later, Li Fan told them. Although Lu San and Fang Ziji were a little worried, they had no choice but to respect Li Fan's decision. After repeatedly cautioning him, they reluctantly left. At this time, within the ruins of the Chaoyuan sect, eerie phenomena had begun to surface. The boundaries between reality and illusion blurred, making it seem as if one had stepped into the ancient past, where they could retrieve cultivation techniques, pills, and magical artifacts from within the sect. As word spread, the entire world was shaken. Cultivators, hearing the news, flocked to the ruins in droves. Among them, the Medicine King sect's group was barely noticeable in the massive crowd. After sending everyone away, Li Fan first checked on Tianyang. Within the enhanced Earth-Fire Origin returning formation, all the precious spiritual materials had been completely absorbed by Tianyang. He himself seemed to be undergoing a transformation, his puppet body was now enveloped in a thick, black crystalline substance. Almost there. I hope you can make it in time for the grand event, little junior brother, Li Fan thought to himself. After bidding farewell to Tianyang, Li Fan did not return to Kongyan City. Instead, he traveled hundreds of miles to Yin Yin Island. Under the watchful eye of formless killing intent, it seemed that Master Yin had recently completed yet another verification of the secrets behind the immortal mortal miasma. The results remained unchanged. He sat limply on the ground, as if all hope had been extinguished, motionless for a long time. Li Fan quietly approached him, sensing a deep aura of death emanating from Master Yin. Despite the sudden appearance of this cultivator, Master Yin showed no surprise. However, he ignored him, merely casting a glance before withdrawing his gaze. Taoist Yin, what exactly did you discover in the immortal mortal miasma? After a long silence, Li Fan finally couldn't resist asking. In his perception, Master Yin's cultivation was indeed at the foundation establishment stage. Even with his true form standing before him, he felt no danger. So, it was you watching me all along. Master Yin did not answer the question but suddenly spoke. I thought it was that damn heavens. He abruptly stood up and patted the dust off his clothes. Ignoring Li Fan, he walked straight toward the underground chamber in the heart of the island. As he walked, he spoke. Back then, I was nothing special, just a small qi condensation cultivator. But one day, in my hometown, it rained. What was terrifying was that every cultivator around me, everyone I knew, disappeared within that rain. Can you imagine that feeling? One moment, they were talking to you, and in the next, they vanished before your eyes. The world became eerily silent. I searched frantically for those who had disappeared, but I found nothing. It was as if I was the only one left in the world. But I didn't know why. Why was I the only one who remained alive? And then, Master Yin arrived at a passage filled with his personal collection. His tone suddenly grew agitated. With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a flame, setting his collection ablaze. Li Fan did not stop him. He simply watched as Master Yin's expression shifted under the flickering flames and continued listening. The rain kept falling. It overflowed from the rivers, as if it intended to drown the entire land. And then, along with the rain, countless corpses began to descend from the sky. Most were incomplete, mere fragments. But some were still whole. I was almost paralyzed with fear. But when one of the more intact corpses landed right in front of me, I finally understood what true terror was. By this point, Master Yin had reached the deepest part of the underground chamber. Light illuminated the space, revealing countless corpses identical to Master Yin himself. Now that Li Fan had reached the nascent soul stage, his perception had become even keener. In his senses, these corpses seemed alive. The blurred flesh and tissue squirmed ever so slightly, imperceptible to the naked eye. Master Yin pointed at the countless corpses littering the ground, his expression gradually turning maniacal. Yes, the corpse that fell before me that day was my own. In fact, every corpse that fell from the sky bore my exact face. And they were all smiling at me. Master Yin's eerie voice echoed through the underground chamber. The sinister truth he spoke of sent chills down the spine. How could such a terrifying thing happen in this world? Can you explain it? He turned to Li Fan, staring at him blankly. Li Fan could only remain silent. There is something wrong with this world. Master Yin lifted his head, gazing at the sky. 1. Tai Shang will be translated as supreme sect from now on. The world is full of things that defy common sense, mountains and rivers shifting, the devouring origin white mist, the immortal mortal miasma. Ever since the immortal ancestor spread his teachings, it has been one grand performance after another. From that day on, I have done everything in my power to uncover the secrets behind it all. Master Yin's voice was deep and enigmatic, his expression dazed. Li Fan also listened intently, focusing on every word. But what followed was a long silence. After a long pause, Master Yin turned his head and looked at Li Fan, a mocking expression appearing on his face. Are you expecting me to tell you the answer? What are you thinking? I am merely an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator. The hidden truths of this world, just the immortal mortal miasma alone, have exhausted all my efforts. As for the others, Master Yin sneered, I have no interest. Li Fan remained unfazed. He replied calmly, if that is the case, could you at least share the mysteries of the immortal mortal miasma? Sure, Master Yin agreed readily. The immortal mortal miasma, it is. Halfway through his sentence, his face suddenly twisted in horror. With a look of utter contempt, he spat on the ground and glared at Li Fan in fury. You dare ask? A selfish, cold-blooded cultivator like you. To let you learn of his deeds would be the greatest blasphemy. I would rather see his actions buried in history, never to be known by the world. Otherwise, people like you would not admire him but mock him in secret. Master Yin seemed to grow increasingly agitated, his gaze toward Li Fan filled with deep-seated hatred. Li Fan's eyes turned cold. Without hesitation, he activated his binding insect divine ability, aiming to capture Master Yin and search his soul for answers. At the same time, he remained vigilant, prepared for Master Yin to suddenly reveal his true strength and counterattack. But unexpectedly, everything went smoothly. There was no resistance, Master Yin was instantly subdued, unable to move. Yet, moments later, Li Fan's expression changed slightly. Because he suddenly realized that the Master Yin, bound by the divine ability had, in an instant, lost all signs of life, he had turned into a lifeless corpse. Li Fan immediately turned his gaze to the other corpses in the underground chamber. At that moment, the previously motionless bodies, once piled haphazardly like rotting flesh, all lifted their heads simultaneously. Every single one of them was grinning menacingly at him. Tricks and illusions. Li Fan remained unfazed by this eerie sight. He let out a cold snort, and in an instant, the five elements cave heaven law domain engulfed Yin Island. The power of the five elements surged, forming an impenetrable prison, attempting to suppress all the corpses within. However, before Li Fan could even act further, something even more bizarre occurred. All the corpses within his domain suddenly lost all life signs, one after another, and truly perished. It was as if his strike had landed on nothing but air, leaving Li Fan feeling frustrated. Sweeping his divine sense across the entire island, he searched for any trace of Master Yin. But at this moment, aside from himself, there was not a single living being on the entire island. Suicide. I don't believe it. Li Fan narrowed his eyes and exerted the power of his cave heaven domain, crushing every corpse into dust. Yet, even after every single body had disintegrated into nothingness, nothing else happened. As if Master Yin had truly perished. But instead of relaxing, Li Fan grew even more alert. Drip. The sound in his ears made Li Fan's pupils contract sharply. He stretched out his hand. A single droplet of rain had appeared out of nowhere above him. It fell onto his palm. And then, the rain poured down. The rain grew heavier and heavier. Gradually, dark shadows began to fall from above, carried by the downpour. Bang, bang, bang. They were corpses, some broken and mangled, others intact. What sent a chill down Li Fan's spine was that these corpses no longer bore the face of Master Yin. Instead, they all looked like him. As they hit the ground, the corpses began to writhe and struggle, twisting into bizarre postures as they slowly raised their heads. Just like Master Yin earlier, their eyes were locked onto him, unwavering. And on their faces was that same eerie, twisted grin. What the hell is this? Li Fan's heart sank. He no longer held back. With a single thought, the heaven-shattering hard sword blazed to life in the underground chamber. Sword light swept across the area, shredding the corpses into dust. KKK. As they vanished, Sinister laughter escaped their mouths, like a mocking taunt from the void. In the brief moment of their disappearance, Li Fan's figure flickered, and in the blink of an eye, he had already left Yin Island, attempting to escape these eerie corpses. But, drip, drip, even after flying hundreds of miles away in an instant, Li Fan still felt the icy rain falling onto his face. This time, he switched to the reverse 5 elements creation destruction sword. The moment the countless corpses fell from the sky again, Li Fan obliterated them with sword light. Yet, his expression only grew darker. Because he realized that dealing with these corpses was slightly more difficult than before. The difference was almost imperceptible, but it was there, a growing resistance, an increasing drain on his strength. And as the rain continued to pour, Li Fan repeated the process again and again, eliminating the corpses each time. This cycle only confirmed his worst fear. This is bad. Li Fan's face turned grim. He had already tried nearly every technique in his arsenal, yet he still couldn't shake off these grotesque corpses. Moreover, the bodies, which looked more and more like himself, seemed to be growing stronger, becoming harder and harder to destroy. If this continued any further, am I really going to be forced to activate truth? Li Fan furrowed his brows. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a divine ability on his truth panel, one he had never fully used before. Chaos. A desperate gamble, but it's worth a try. And so, as the cold rain fell once more, Li Fan stood firm amidst the grinning corpses. With a solemn expression, he raised his hand as if wielding a brush, and with a single, fluid motion, he wrote the word. Chaos, Luan. Boom. The instant the chaos glyph formed, an uncontrollable surge of power erupted within Li Fan's body. It was as if an immense force was bearing down on him. Inside his 5 elements cave heaven, ominous creaking sounds rang out as if the entire domain was on the verge of collapse. Even the natural circulation of the 5 elements began to spiral into disorder. Within the wood element cave heaven, energies of water, fire, metal, and earth burst forth chaotically. The same occurred in the other elemental domains. In an instant, his newly formed 5 elements cave heaven plunged into utter turmoil. Strange and eerie phenomena began manifesting. But as its master, Li Fan had no time to care. Because at that very moment, his vision was overwhelmed by an infinite deluge of hallucinations. No, rather than hallucinations, it was more like he had suddenly experienced 1,000 lifetimes of reincarnation in a single instant. Each cycle of life and death unfolded with terrifying clarity, flooding his mind with countless realities. It was as if he had been split into countless versions of himself. His head felt like it was about to explode. Just as he was on the verge of breaking, a scripture that had been silently operating in the background suddenly surged forth. The Chuanwang heart-refining mantra roared to life. Since Li Fan had begun cultivating the heart-refining mantra, he had never experienced such a wild and frenzied operational speed. It was as if some special switch had been triggered. The efficiency of the Chuanwang heart-refining mantra had increased not just by 100-fold but by 1,000-fold or more. If Li Fan's previous attempts at self-exploration were akin to a slow-moving millstone pulled by a donkey, then now, the Xuanwang heart-refining mantra was like a roaring, thunderous mechanical giant, absorbing all the countless surreal and lifelike experiences that had suddenly surged into Li Fan's mind. Restoring order, returning to clarity. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head, instantly cooling down the searing heat within. Li Fan gradually regained his senses, pulling himself out of his trance and confusion. This, quote. In an instant, Li Fan understood what had just happened to him, and his heart was filled with shock. He had not expected the backlash from the complete, chaos, character glyph to be so terrifying. Once it took shape, it was several times stronger than his previous simulated attempts, which had always fallen just short of completion. Once the chaos character fully formed, it underwent a qualitative transformation, its power now incomparable to the fragmented pieces he had previously grasped. If even the backlash is this terrifying, then its actual effects must be. Suppressing the turmoil within his body and mind, Li Fan looked up toward the sky. He saw that where the rain had once fallen and where the corpses had previously dropped, the scene seemed to twist and distort. It was as if an invisible void existed there. Rain and corpses alike disappeared into thin air the moment they came close. However, after consuming the eerie rainwater, the twisted void seemed to be slowly shrinking. Thus, the two forces reached a state of mutual balance, constantly neutralizing each other. Finally, when the rain ceased to fall from the sky, The influence of the chaos glyph vanished as well. A battered and disheveled figure plummeted from the air. It was none other than Master Yin. At this moment, his body had become semi-transparent. His face, filled with disbelief, stared blankly at Li Fan. He tried to say something, opening his mouth, but no sound came out. Master Yin lowered his head, looking at himself as if he had understood something. He no longer struggled in vain. His body became increasingly faint, yet there was no trace of fear on his face at his impending demise. Instead, he showed an expression of relief and liberation. Moments later, Master Yin completely disappeared from this world. Li Fan had no time to celebrate surviving the ordeal. Driven by the overwhelming sense of impending crisis in his heart, he endured his injuries, activated the sky-shrouding hand's secret technique, and pushed his escape technique to its limits, swiftly fleeing the scene. Not long after Li Fan's departure, a vast and boundless divine consciousness seemed to descend. The scenery beneath the sea reversed like rewinding time itself, tracing back events and replaying the past. But just as Li Fan's image was about to emerge, a crack suddenly appeared out of thin air. Then a second, a third, countless cracks followed. The vision shattered like a broken mirror, restoring the timeline to normal. The divine consciousness lingered for a long while, as if contemplating something. Then, it silently scanned the entire Kongyan Sea, but ultimately found no anomalies. And finally, it withdrew into complete silence. At this moment, far from returning to Kongyan City, Li Fan dug out a mineral stone from the seabed beneath him. Feigning delight, he carefully placed it into his storage ring. Then, for quite some time, he pretended to continue mining, as if he were just an ordinary cultivator collecting resources. Only when the ominous feeling of danger completely faded did he stop his act. Just moments ago, right when he was rushing back to Kongyan City, an unprecedented sense of crisis suddenly struck, and his heart pounded violently as if he would perish in the next second. There was no time to think. He first dispelled his sky-shrouding concealment, then activated the mysterious true spirit transformation, instantly changing his appearance into that of another cultivator. Feigning nonchalance, he pretended to be mining ores from the seabed. Sure enough, his intuition was correct. Moments later, he felt as though he was being watched. Suppressing his unease, he acted as if he had noticed nothing. Though the situation was extremely perilous, he ultimately managed to evade the other party's detection. The chaos character, the Xuanwang heart refining mantra, the eerie duplicating rain, and that immense divine sense. On his way back to Kongyan City, Li Fan kept pondering the connection between these elements. If I hadn't unintentionally used the chaos character, I would have had no way to escape the duplicating me rain. My only option would have been to confront it directly. But to my surprise, the chaos character glyph was actually able to dispel the duplicating me rain. To Li Fan, Master Yin and the rain that carried countless identical corpses bore a striking resemblance to the eerie anomalies of the Xuanwang realm. Both were phenomena that defied logic, rules beyond rules. However, this so-called unalterable, ever-present strangeness had been neutralized by the chaos character. What did this mean? Li Fan repeatedly recalled the moment when the duplicating me rain disappeared. Chaos, chaos. Rather than being dispelled, it felt more like chaos upon chaos, canceling each other out. A bold idea suddenly surfaced in his mind. Could it be that the root of all eerie anomalies in the world originates from this concept of chaos? Once the thought arose, it became impossible to suppress. At the same time, a deep and inexplicable fear gripped his heart. Back in the mist, I saw the word chaos carved into a stone. Its power seemed to have faded over the passage of time. But without a doubt, it was the culprit that destroyed that entire mist-shrouded world. If that was merely a weakened remnant of the original chaos character. Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Furthermore, it seems that powerful beings in the Xuanwang realm are extremely interested in this chaos character. The moment they sense its presence, they descend to investigate. It seems that unless I am faced with an absolute life or death crisis, I should avoid using it as much as possible. Li Fan silently contemplated. After all, he had formed his nascent soul through the five elements cave heaven, granting him boundless regenerative power. By the time he returned to Kongyan City, his injuries had completely healed, leaving no trace of abnormality. Additionally, the momentary glimpse of myriad realities that had surfaced in his mind had been absorbed and neutralized by the Xuanwang heart refining mantra, which had been operating at full capacity. However, something puzzled Li Fan. Under normal circumstances, absorbing such a large amount of stray thoughts should have nourished and strengthened his divine soul, based on his past experiences. Yet, from the moment it happened until now, he hadn't felt the slightest increase in his soul's power. Could it have been used to repair hidden wounds within my soul instead? With a hint of doubt, Li Fan examined himself carefully. The heart-refining mantra had gradually returned to its normal rhythm, yet he keenly sensed that it had undergone a subtle transformation. It felt as if it had achieved a form of sublimation, though not yet complete. A sudden impulse drove Li Fan to open his truth panel, his gaze locking onto the technique descriptions. The Xuanwang heart-refining mantra, previously ranked first, had silently changed its name. Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra incomplete. Li Fan's pupils contracted sharply, his heart filled with shock. Chapter 641. From Refinement to Immortal, though just a single character apart, the difference is as vast as heaven and earth. For countless ages, the path forward in the Xuanwang realm had been severed. Immortality had become an unattainable goal, existing only in ancient texts, where it served as an object of longing and imagination for cultivators. Yet now, Li Fan had come across a technique that might be related to true immortals. True immortal inheritance. Just the thought alone sent waves of excitement surging through Li Fan's heart. The exhilaration and fervor he felt at this moment were reminiscent of the time he first encountered Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi, when he had finally confirmed the existence of cultivators in this world. No wonder the Xuanwang mantra has always been ranked at the forefront of all my cultivation techniques. Even the cloud-water illusion dream technique passed down by Qin Tang at the Dao integration realm pales in comparison. It turns out to be the true legacy of an immortal. The path to immortality is not broken. The path to immortality remains open. Li Fan's heart surged with emotions, making it difficult for him to calm down. Even with his current state of mind and cultivation, it took him quite some time to gradually regain composure. After carefully comprehending this so-called Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, he realized that, perhaps because it was only a fragment, it did not seem significantly different from the previous refining heart mantra. Or perhaps, with Li Fan's current level, he was still unable to discern the true distinction between the two. He began to recall the origins of the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra. Its earliest form was the widely spread technique in the Xuanwang realm, known for expelling miasma from the body, Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra. Since this technique had no other benefits aside from purging mortal impurities, very few cultivators continued practicing it after drawing qi into their bodies. However, due to Li Fan's poor natural aptitude, he had struggled to expel the miasma within him. Thus, while waiting for the opportunity to enter the purification spirit pool, he tirelessly cultivated the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra day and night. Moreover, thanks to his truth insight ability, which allowed him to perceive even the slightest changes within himself with great clarity, he became convinced that the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra was indeed effective. As a result, he never abandoned it. During the excruciating purification process in the purification spirit pool, where the immortal mortal miasma were forcibly expelled from his body, Li Fan never wavered in his pursuit of the Tao, even when he was on the verge of losing consciousness. His unwavering determination remained unshaken. With the power of truth which allowed him to endlessly reincarnate and start over, he feared neither life nor death. Ultimately, when he successfully transitioned from a mere mortal into a qi condensation cultivator, the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra evolved into the Xuanwang Refining Heart Mantra. Throughout his countless cycles of reincarnation, Li Fan continued to experiment and refine his cultivation method. Eventually, he discovered the true way to practice the Xuanwang Refining Heart Mantra, cultivating the Tao heart in reverse. Like a great millstone, he shattered all his worldly attachments and transformed them into nourishment for his soul. The profundity of this technique far surpassed the cultivation methods currently circulated within the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. Originally, Li Fan believed that this was the ultimate form of the Xuanwang mantra. However, due to a fateful coincidence, when he activated the chaos character and endured its 10,000 lifetimes shadow reflection, backlash, the refining heart mantra began to operate on its own, finally shedding its disguise and revealing its true nature. Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra. Li Fan kept repeating this name in his mind. Without a doubt, this was an unfathomably powerful technique. It was said that worldly matters contained even the gods and immortals. No matter how powerful a cultivator was, when entangled in the endless cycle of mundane affairs, their Tao heart would inevitably suffer damage. The 10,000 lifetimes glimpse of myriad realities was akin to personally experiencing hundreds or even thousands of lifetimes. Countless images and emotions surged into his mind all at once. If not for Li Fan's own experience of reincarnating through 100 lifetimes, granting him an unshakable will, he would have succumbed to madness and insanity on the spot. Without the assistance of the Immortal Heart Mantra, no matter how extraordinary Li Fan's willpower was, escaping the influence of the glimpse of myriad realities on his own would likely take him several decades. However, with the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, the result was entirely different. Almost in an instant, those sincere emotions and vivid memories were dissolved and absorbed. In an instant, I have experienced countless cycles of reincarnation, yet my immortal heart remains unchanged. So this is the power of an immortal. Li Fan couldn't help but feel a deep sense of yearning. With such an immortal technique, the various illusory realms of the Xuanwang world will be nothing to me. A sharp glint flashed in Li Fan's eyes. The first thing that came to his mind was the moment when Senior Sister Zhao had drawn him into the Grand Tao sect. If I wield the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, perhaps I can maintain my true self within that real illusion. With self-awareness and active intent, I may even be able to steal more secrets. In my next life, I must give it a try. After pondering for a long time, Li Fan focused his gaze on the character, incomplete, that followed the Immortal Heart Mantra. This immortal technique is still incomplete, and to restore it, one must use the experiences and memories of countless past lives as raw material. Originally, using the chaos character technique to induce spiritual backlash was the best method. But, Li Fan frowned slightly, he still felt lingering fear over that immense divine sense that had appeared afterward. His instincts told him that the owner of that divine sense had likely already marked the chaos character technique. If he used it again, he would probably be discovered instantly. Perhaps I was able to escape before only because the chaos character technique had not appeared in this world for many years. Once may be fine, but never again. No matter. Thinking of the mysterious treasure he carried, Li Fan smiled slightly. Even if I only get one surprise opportunity per lifetime, for me, that is as good as an endless supply. No matter whether it was the one who deliberately hid the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, or that immense divine sense so concerned with chaos, neither would ever expect that an anomaly like me exists in this world. Reflecting on his past experiences, Li Fan knew just how difficult it was to restore the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra step by step back into the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra. Moreover, powerful figures were constantly watching, never letting their guard down. Even if someone was lucky enough to rediscover it by chance, they could never remain in the blind spot of those great beings' perception like Li Fan had, completely unnoticed. Among the infinite possible futures, as long as a single sliver of hope exists, I will find it and turn the impossible into reality. Li Fan once again grasped the terrifying nature of truth. At the same time, he felt immense gratitude. If I did not possess this extraordinary treasure, no matter how much of a genius I might be, I would never be able to achieve transcendence from this Xuanwang world. Filled with emotion, Li Fan began searching through the Tianxuan mirror for scattered information about the Xuanwang Refining Heart Mantra. It makes sense. The immortal mortal miasma violates the fundamental laws of heaven and earth, so how could the method to dispel it possibly be simple? A flash of understanding passed through Li Fan's mind. With his current level of authority, he could access many things that ordinary cultivators were forbidden to see. However, regarding the origins of the Xuanwang Refining Heart Mantra, there were countless theories, none of which were definitive. Chapter 642. At the end of the Great Plague era, under the coercion of cultivators, the vast majority of mortals were relocated to various hidden realms and small worlds. However, as the influence of the incompatibility of immortal cultivation techniques grew stronger, the cultivators ultimately could not escape the fate of mutual destruction. The immortal sects collapsed, and the cultivation civilization entered a prolonged period of darkness. As the saying goes, when one declines, another rises. The number of cultivators dwindled to near extinction. Yet, mortals, like resilient weeds, began to emerge once again across the world. Regarding the origins of these newly born mortals, some claimed they were survivors of the Great Migration. Others believed they were the descendants of cultivators. There were also those who suggested that mortals from the small worlds had broken through the blockade of the immortal ceiling formation and returned. Regardless, as cultivators gradually vanished from the land, the mortals of the Xuanwang realm began to thrive in the gaps left behind. Along with the resurgence of mortals came the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra. Like folk songs and legends of unknown origin, it spread by word of mouth. Eventually, nearly every human tribe became aware of this technique, which allowed mortals to escape the influence of the immortal mortal miasma and once again embark on the path of cultivation. Today's cultivators speculate that this could very well be the work of the mysterious Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. After all, the Purification Spirit Pool, which also removes the immortal mortal miasma, was created by the Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign. It is highly possible that the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra was an earlier experiment before the creation of the Purification Spirit Pool. However, now that Li Fan understands the true nature of the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra, he finds this possibility unlikely. The Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign, the nominal leader of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, only appeared a few times in the Alliance's earliest recorded history before vanishing entirely. Rather than believing he was a true immortal, Li Fan considered it more likely that, like himself, the Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign had uncovered the secrets of the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra. Perhaps, inspired by this discovery, he later created the Purification Spirit Pool. Could the disappearance of the Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign also be related to the Xuanwang Clear Heart Mantra? This thought surfaced in Li Fan's mind. Yet, when he tried to search for records on the Eastern Extremity Heavenly Sovereign, he found almost nothing. Just as before, the information was nearly non-existent, with no additional records to be found. This was completely inconsistent with the status of a leader of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. This is truly unsettling. Li Fan decided not to dwell on it further and instead focused once again on comprehending the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra. Half a month later, Li Fan gathered everyone in the administration hall once more. At first, they thought he had another major announcement to make, but instead, they were greeted with the news that he was going into seclusion again. Didn't he just leave seclusion not long ago? And now he's going back. Could it be that ancient cultivators were all this diligent? Lord Envoy doesn't lack contribution points, so he can maintain that spiritual awakening state permanently. Cultivation for him is practically a pleasure. If I had the same opportunity, I'd do it too. There were rumors that Lord Envoy had already restored his nascent soul realm. Could it be that he is now breaking through to the soul transformation stage? Amid the heated discussions, only He Zhenghao appeared deep in thought. It seems that Lord Envoy is making preparations for the descent of the spirit of heaven and earth. He casually glanced at Zhou Qingong beside him. When Lord Envoy announced this matter, Zhou Qingong's expression remained completely unchanged, clearly indicating that he had already known about it beforehand. Thinking back, he had once been the most trusted subordinate of Lord Envoy. Unfortunately, due to a moment of greed, he had lost that trust to this young man. At this thought, a wave of discomfort surged in He Zhenghao's heart. His eyes flickered, and an idea surfaced in his mind. He transmitted his voice to Zhou Qingong, saying, "Taoist Zhou, how has your cultivation been progressing lately?" Zhou Qingong looked at He Zhenghao in surprise. After a brief moment of contemplation, he immediately understood He Zhenghao's underlying intentions. With a cold sneer in his heart, he responded along He Zhenghao's line of questioning, Brother He, you must be joking. You know very well that Lord Envoy does not manage affairs personally, leaving all matters, big and small, to us. Originally, Yao Yuan helped share the workload, but he recently took a leave of absence to travel. That has made things even busier. Just handling political affairs takes up nearly all of my time. How could I possibly have the peace of mind to cultivate? He Zhenghao pretended to be in complete agreement, sighing as if sympathizing. However, before long, he shifted the topic. I have something to say. Would Taoist Zhou be willing to hear it? Zhou Qingong was momentarily stunned before responding quickly, Please speak, Brother He. He Zhenghao said solemnly, Taoist Zhou, your dedication to assisting Lord Envoy is commendable. But, He Zhenghao continued meaningfully, one must still rely on their own strength. No matter how much favor you have from Lord Envoy, your cultivation level remains at the golden core stage, moreover, at its weakest early stage. In a small place like Kongyansi, you can still maintain authority over your subordinates. However, as Lord Envoy's cultivation continues to recover and his realm grows higher, he will inevitably attract numerous nascent soul and soul transformation cultivators. If you stagnate at your current level, how will you command their respect? Upon hearing this, Zhou Qingong's expression changed slightly. He initially looked as if he wanted to argue, but after a moment, he fell into deep thought. Seeing this, He Zhenghao secretly felt pleased with himself. That rhetoric from Gao Yuan is truly effective. If not for my firm Dao heart, I might have been swayed by him back then, He Zhenghao mused. After a long while, Zhou Qingang seemed to have come to a realization, though a bitter smile appeared on his face. You are right, but I truly cannot spare the time. I find it difficult to cultivate in peace, he said, looking at He Zhenghao. He Zhenghao's eyes lit up. Taoist Zhou, why not follow Gao Yuan's example? There must be great opportunities hidden within the ruins of the Chao Yuan sect. If you can obtain them, you could easily advance by one minor realm. Perhaps even breaking through to nascent soul isn't out of reach. Zhou Qingang hesitated, as if he wanted to speak but refrained. However, He Zhenghao seized the moment and continued, I know what worries you. You fear that your absence will affect governance, correct? Rest assured, I am here. If I've already taken on extra responsibilities, what's one more? Zhou Qingang looked at him suspiciously. If that's the case, why don't you go yourself? Since when have you been so considerate of your colleagues? He Zhenghao's expression darkened slightly. How could you say that? Lord Envoy once reminded us that we must prioritize unity among ourselves. If my two brothers can enhance their cultivation, what's a little hardship on my part? As Lord Envoy's cultivation grows, more and more followers will rally to his side. We are natural allies, helping you is helping myself. He Zhenghao paused, observed Zhou Qingang expression carefully, and then continued, besides, I've had some insights recently. I believe I'm not far from breaking through to nascent soul. Even without external opportunities, I'm confident I can advance within 10 years. Why not let me help you achieve this? Chapter 643. Are you confident you can advance to the nascent soul stage within 10 years? Zhou Qingang looked at the smug He Zhenghao, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. This reaction was not feigned. After carefully examining He Zhenghao for a moment, Zhou Qingang realized that his claim might not be mere boasting. A profound and mysterious aura lurked within him, extremely well hidden. If He Zhenghao hadn't revealed it himself, and if the current, Zhou Qingang, weren't actually Li Fan's true body in disguise, it would have been nearly impossible to detect. As memories from the Dao Deviation Stone replayed in his mind, Li Fan quickly identified the source of this change. It was due to a simple white jade that He Xingxin had given to He Zhenghao before her reluctant departure, instructing him to nurture it within his dantian. He has never trained properly, yet just by relying on this jade, he is confident that he can advance from golden core to nascent soul in such a short time. This jade is indeed an extraordinary treasure. Even for the Heng clan of Tianyu Prefecture, it must be quite rare. He Xingxin truly went to great lengths to ensure her father's survival. But unfortunately, with an almost imperceptible cold gaze, Zhou Qingang glanced at He Zhenghao, sneering inwardly. He then feigned great astonishment, exclaiming, Taoist He, your progress is truly astonishing. This is completely unexpected. It seems that your talent for cultivation far surpasses mine and Gao Yuan's. A trace of embarrassment flashed across He Zhenghao's face, but he quickly concealed it and arrogantly declared, haha, no need to feel discouraged. In cultivation, besides talent, perseverance and fortunate encounters also play a crucial role. Since your natural aptitude is slightly lacking, you must not let this opportunity slip by. Hearing He Zhenghao's persuasion, Zhou Qingang appeared to lower his head in contemplation. Just as He Zhenghao believed that he had swayed him and was secretly pleased, Zhou Qingang let out a long sigh and refused his proposal. You are right, Taoist He. To better serve Lord Envoy, personal strength is crucial. However, opportunities often come hand in hand with dangers. As for me, Zhou Qingang shook his head, feigning regret. I have never been blessed with good fortune. Even if there is some great opportunity within Chaoyuan sect, I doubt it would ever fall into my hands. I'd rather stay here in Kongyansi and focus on my duties. And besides, Lord Envoy. Zhou Qingang deliberately paused before continuing, his lordship never neglects his subordinates. If he sees our dedication and hard work, he might reward us with something that could help us break through our current bottlenecks. But I still appreciate your kindness, Taoist He. Zhou Qingang cupped his hands in salute before turning to leave Bu Zheng Hall. Watching Zhou Qingang departing figure, He Zhenghao's expression flickered uncertainly. This brat truly deserves to be one of the Lord's trusted aides, he must know something. It seems my decision was right. Since even he refuses to leave Kongyansi, that must mean this place is not only free of danger but also holds tremendous benefits. With his last bit of hesitation erased, He Zhenghao solidified his resolve. And seeing the greed and deep obsession in He Jinghao's gaze, Li Fan knew exactly what was going through his mind. The greedier one is, the more foolish they become. The more foolish they are, the greedier they get. A vicious cycle. The He Zhenghao of this life is no longer the Taoist he I once knew. The experiences one goes through shape their personality and fate so profoundly. Li Fan pondered for a moment, sensing a deeper truth within this realization. Perhaps, this has some connection to the foundation of the new method, which thrives on boundless greed and ruthless plundering. Shaking off these thoughts, Li Fan resumed his usual routine. For the time being, he continued acting as Zhou Qingong, handling various affairs methodically. Meanwhile, his disguised clone, posing as the secret envoy Li Fan, remained hidden deep within the administration hall's secret chamber, claiming to be in secluded cultivation. In secret, Li Fan had swapped places with his true body and clone, while also starting to craft a puppet in Zhou Qingong likeness. Deep within Kanyan Sea, he activated the Earth-Fire Returning Origin formation, consuming a small amount of ordinary materials to forge a skeletal puppet. Then, using the mysterious True Spirit transformation technique, a method for refining clones, he coated the puppet's bones with a layer of flesh and skin. He once again attached a trace of his divine sense to it. In the end, he successfully created a puppet body that looked exactly like Zhou Qingong. After transferring his clothing, storage ring, and other belongings, Li Fan's true self took one last look at the vast azure sea of clouds and shook his head. It is time to leave, he thought. Reverting to his original appearance, he sped toward the secret realm of the Longevity Valley without looking back. Meanwhile, the puppet Zhou Qingong, controlled by the trace of Li Fan's remaining divine sense, returned alone to Kanyan Immortal City. Since Zhou Qingong was always reserved and taciturn, his somewhat stiff expression did not immediately arouse suspicion among other cultivators. Moreover, Li Fan deliberately reduced his interactions with outsiders. On the rare occasions he did meet others, he always appeared engrossed in official duties, busy to the point of being overwhelmed. Thus, within the vast Kanyan city, despite the endless flow of cultivators, no one realized that Zhou Qingong had already completed a seamless deception in the shadows. Though there were still some flaws in the disguise, and in time, someone was bound to notice, it hardly mattered. For the entire Kanyan Sea and all the living beings within it were already approaching their final moments. As Li Fan's true self was still on his way. On this day, both he and his divine sense-possessed puppet suddenly felt a wave of unease. What is that? The startled cries from Kanyan City stirred Li Fan's heart, and he instinctively looked up at the sky. There, a massive black fireball had suddenly appeared without warning in the firmament. Trailing a dark tail, it hurtled toward Kanyan Sea at a terrifying angle. This is... Li Fan's pupils contracted sharply. Crimson flame, sensing a vaguely familiar aura from the black fireball, Li Fan hesitated, uncertain. The black fireball was unbelievably fast. Before the cultivators of Kanyan Sea could even react, it had already crashed into the ocean. Wherever it touched, the seawater instantly vaporized due to the extreme heat. A massive void appeared in the sea before the black fireball violently struck the ocean floor. Boom, 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 deafening explosions erupted, shaking the entire Kanyan Sea. Even Kanyan City, high above the clouds, was soon swept by the shockwaves, swaying like a floating leaf in a storm. Amid the violent impact, towering tsunamis surged outward from the fireball's impact site, engulfing everything in their path. The cultivators watching in horror saw that within those colossal waves, hundreds of meters high, dark flames flickered ominously. Wherever the waves passed, the fusion of water and fire obliterated countless islands in an instant, reducing them to ashes. Chapter 644. The waves, engulfed in black flames, were utterly terrifying. Not only were mortal islands easily destroyed, but even the large islands fortified with protective formations and guarded by cultivators were as fragile as paper. Under the horrifying destructive force, they turned to ashes in an instant. The island guarding cultivators had no chance to resist, they vanished completely into the sky. The anomalies caused by their deaths lasted only for a brief moment before being engulfed by the dense black aura in the heavens. The massive waves continued to sweep across the sea, while the colossal black fireball at the center of it all shattered into tens of thousands of black streaks of light in an earth-shaking explosion. From the point of impact, these streaks of light shot out in all directions, scattering across the Kanyan Sea. Faced with this apocalyptic scene, the cultivators in Kanyan City were momentarily stunned. Then, unable to suppress their fear, they let out terrified cries. By the Dharma transmitting immortal ancestor. Is this the end of the world? A great catastrophe, a terrifying calamity is upon us. How could such a massive meteor fall without any warning from the 10,000 Immortal Alliance? What were they doing? Some cultivators were terrified, some went mad, others were furious, but there were still those who held faith in the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. They believed it was merely a natural disaster, an asteroid calamity. Even though the monstrous tsunami could wipe out all the islands in the Kanyan Sea, the city floating high in the sky should remain safe. Yet, there were always cultivators who prioritized survival above all else. Run, this was the first thought that flashed through their minds. However, when they rushed to the Dharma Transmission Plaza, they discovered something that filled them with horror. Damn it, why have all the teleportation formations stopped working? It's over. There's no escape. We're doomed. A conspiracy. This must be the 10,000 Immortal Alliance's doing. Panic spread like wildfire through the plaza, and their cries of alarm quickly reached every corner of Kanyan Sea City. Within moments, all cultivators in the city knew that the teleportation formation had failed. As they saw the approaching tsunami, fear and chaos took hold. Yet, amidst the turmoil, He Zhenghao remained unnaturally calm. Though he felt a flicker of fear, he forcibly suppressed it through sheer willpower. Such an overwhelming force, this must be the spirit of heaven and earth. When will it take form? According to legend, spirits of heaven and earth always manifest in humanoid forms. A trace of unease crept into He Zhenghao's heart. It should be fine. If the Lord Envoy could predict the descent of the spirit of heaven and earth, he must have prepared for this. He reassured himself. Sure enough, just as he had this thought, a voice suddenly resonated throughout Kanyan Sea City, Li Fan's voice. Cultivators, do not panic. With Immortal Lord Hongxi here, nothing will go wrong. All of you need only remain within the city. Formation Hall, activate the Grand Defensive Array formation at full power to withstand the disaster. Marshal Hall squads, assemble and maintain order. The steady voice echoed through the city. Like a stabilizing anchor, it momentarily restored calm among the cultivators. Soon after, a glowing barrier enveloped Kanyan Immortal City, while cultivators rushed to reinforce various formation nodes. For a brief moment, order returned to the city. Meanwhile, Li Fan gazed at the endless black streaks of light in the sky and the ever-expanding tsunami. Then, his eyes drifted toward Immortal Lord Hongxi, dressed in white not far away. Li Fan saw that his face was filled with solemnity. Black flames. Has Crimson Flame been enhanced, or is this the power of another spirit of heaven and earth? Ink Flame. Faced with this unexpected change in the world, Li Fan was somewhat surprised, but overall, this outcome was still within his expectations. In previous lifetimes, the Crimson Flame had descended as a heavenly mandate, carrying out acts of burning the seas and annihilating the world. However, after the Crimson Flame was sacrificed and refined by cultivators, it would trigger a violent counterattack from the will of heaven and earth. The catastrophic ink death would descend, completely reducing Kanyan Sea to nothingness. But in this world, due to the battle between the heavenly doctor, the sage, and the fisherman, the predetermined timeline for the world's destruction was drastically moved forward. The Crimson Flame burning the seas, there is still room for maneuver. If the will of heaven and earth had intended complete destruction from the start, then what would have descended wouldn't have been that feeble boiler worker, Crimson Flame. Instead, it would have sent a much stronger spirit of heaven and earth. Heaven's mandate, change, fate. As Li Fan's thoughts turned, he vaguely came to an understanding. The will of heaven and earth is not immutable, but dynamically adjusts based on actual circumstances. Yet its ultimate objective remains the same. Kanyan Sea must perish. The reason behind this is perhaps not only because cultivators plunder the heavens and seize the land, making them the scourge of heaven and earth, but also due to the involvement of that group from the heavenly doctor. Li Fan's eyes gleamed with sharp insight. While he pondered, a massive wave was already approaching beneath Kanyan City. Even though Kanyan Immortal City stood high above the clouds, a mere few hundred-meter-tall wave seemed incapable of posing a threat. However, for some unknown reason, an ominous premonition surged in the hearts of all the cultivators within the city. And as it turned out, their instincts were correct. The colossal wave, flickering with black flames, arrived beneath Kanyan City, and then, as if it had come alive, its movement trajectory abruptly changed. It surged upward, ferociously crashing toward the sky. Cries of alarm rang out in succession. At that moment, the silent Immortal Lord Hongxi finally made his move. Beneath Kanyan Immortal City, a vast mountain range suddenly rose from the ground. Like a great wall, it forcibly blocked the oncoming wave. The wave, obstructed, fell back onto the sea. Yet Li Fan, who had witnessed Immortal Lord Hongxi's full strength before, could tell that this seemingly casual move had actually cost Hongxi nearly half of his power. That strong, feeling the faint tremor beneath his feet, Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Although this was only one of his clone, it contained 3 divine abilities passed down from his true body, each executed with full force. At a critical moment, he could make it seem real enough to deceive everyone. The reason for such an elaborate act was to solidify the illusion that Li Fan, the cultivator from the Heavenly Mechanism sect, had perished. Li Fan was certain that even amidst this apocalyptic calamity of burning seas, the 10,000 Immortal Alliance would find a way to uncover the final moments before Kongyunsi was obliterated. Thus, his act had to be flawless, he could not afford to reveal a single flaw. It's still not time to make a move. The crimson flame, no, where is the true body of the ink flame now? Li Fan kept his gaze locked onto the surface of Kongyunsi, trying to discern any clues. Meanwhile, the temporarily blocked wave, as if retreating into dormancy, fell silent upon returning to the sea. But what followed next was a rain of thousands of black fire meteors. Almost as if they possessed intelligence, these meteors altered their original trajectory upon seeing the wave's assault had been thwarted. They all collectively hurtled toward Kongyun City instead. The sight was so overwhelming that it left the gathered cultivators speechless. Boom! The moment the first meteor collided with the protective barrier, the entire Kongyun City trembled violently. What horrified the cultivators even more was that, after just a single impact, fine cracks had already begun to spread across the protective shield. Chapter 645. Within the Kongyun Immortal City, the cultivators were instantly thrown into an uproar upon witnessing the scene. Fortunately, ever since the last time 10,000 Immortal Island was raided and taken by the 5 Elders Association, the defenses of the rebuilt Kongyun City had been reinforced to a level far superior to that of ordinary state-level immortal cities. Its protection was now comparable to that of several central state capitals. As the defensive grand formation shimmered with flowing light, the crack in the barrier vanished in an instant. Before the people could even breathe a sigh of relief, a second meteorite of flowing fire crashed into the protective barrier once more. This impact was even more intense than the previous one, causing the floating city in the clouds to tremble violently, as if it were about to plummet from the sky at any moment. What truly filled the crowd with dread, however, was that this black meteorite did not fully dissipate upon impact. Instead, it left behind a viscous, tar-like substance that wriggled and corroded the protective grand formation. Even from a great distance, one could hear the eerie sizzling sounds coming from the outer edges of the array. Although the heavenly origin transformation formation of Kongyun City is strong, it won't hold out for long, said Li Fan, who quickly made his assessment as a formation master. While the grand formation struggled against the corrosive black, countless more streaks of black fire rained down upon Kongyun Immortal City. Though the immortal ancestor statue continuously emitted bursts of violet radiance to intercept some of the incoming fire, many of them still managed to bombard the city unimpeded. In an instant, Kongyun Immortal City swayed like a lone leaf caught in a violent storm, teetering on the brink of destruction. At that moment, Immortal Lord Hongxi finally displayed the decisiveness expected of a ruler of an entire prefecture. He transformed into a towering giant, standing as high as the heavens, and intercepted the countless black fireballs. At the same time, he issued a cold, commanding order. Activate the entire transformation grand formation of the Kongyun Sea area. Draw power from all surrounding nodes and ensure Kongyun Immortal City remains in peak condition. As he spoke, he cast a mystical seal, sending it soaring toward the highest point of the city. For a brief moment, silence fell over the entire Kongyun Immortal City. Most cultivators did not understand the full implications of Immortal Lord Hongxi's words, but those who did turned pale in an instant. Li Fan, too, narrowed his eyes as he looked at Hongxi, who had a resolute expression on his face, and silently praised him. Such boldness! Having studied formations for countless lifetimes, Li Fan had an in-depth understanding of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance's defensive system. Each guardian city was equipped with protective formations. Within each state, a floating celestial capital served as the core, linking together hundreds of smaller defensive formations into a vast statewide formation. Moreover, throughout the territory of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, the statewide formations were interconnected, forming an immense and terrifying array that covered nearly half of the Xuanwang realm. A layered system, endlessly intricate, immeasurably powerful. The defensive formation of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance was replaced every 500 years. In the past, Li Fan had once seen the remnants of an older array, the 10,000-mile Rivers Mountains formation, on a sunken island. However, the Alliance was currently using the Heavenly Origin Transformation formation. Although its defensive strength was slightly weaker than the previous formation, it possessed an irreplaceable ability. It could absorb the life essence of all beings within the formation to enhance its power. Thus, Immortal Lord Hongshi's intent was crystal clear. He planned to fully activate the Heavenly Origin Transformation formation, drawing in the life essence of all living beings still surviving on the remaining islands of Kongyan Sea area, sacrificing them to maintain the protective barrier of Kongyan Immortal City. From a purely logical standpoint, this decision was not wrong. After all, in the face of such a catastrophe, Kongyan Immortal City was the only place that could still barely hold out, while all other islands were doomed to be reduced to ashes in an instant. By sacrificing those who were already destined to perish, the formation might be strengthened just enough to grant the cultivators within Kongyan Immortal City a sliver of hope for survival. But, being annihilated by the wrath of heaven and earth and being slaughtered by one's own people were two completely different things. Not everyone had the resolve to make such a cold and ruthless decision, to treat the lives of their fellow brethren as nothing more than expendable fuel. So, after Immortal Lord Hongshi's words spread, the cultivators of the formation hall remained silent and motionless. Hongshi himself also seemed to lack the courage to repeat the order. His expression was grim as he watched the protective barrier on the verge of collapse, yet he did not issue another command. "I shall lend you a hand." A sharp glint flashed in Li Fan's eyes. His clone soared into the air and shouted loudly, "What are you all waiting for? This is a matter of life and death. Just follow orders. All consequences will be borne by Lord Hongshi and me alone." Hongshi glanced at Li Fan with some surprise. The cultivators of the formation hall also exchanged glances, gritted their teeth, and finally made up their minds. One after another, talisman seals flew toward the various nodes of the Heavenly Origin Transformation formation. The protective shield suddenly erupted with brilliance. It was as if time had frozen for an instant. In the next moment, endless spiritual energy surged in from all directions. The purple barrier instantly became as solid as a tangible entity, effortlessly blocking the impact of the black firestorm. The violent tremors ceased, replaced by continuous muffled explosions. For now, the crisis was averted, yet the surviving cultivators of Kongyan City showed little joy on their faces. Because along with the drastic enhancement of the Heavenly Origin Transformation formation, the air was filled with agonized wails and curses. On the glowing barrier, horrifying scenes were faintly visible, humans being drained of all their vital energy in an instant, reduced to skeletons. It was like a purgatory on Earth, chilling to the bone. Though we can protect ourselves for now, this is not a long-term solution. All contact with headquarters has been severed. Staying here is nothing more than waiting for death. I intend to go out and confront this spirit of heaven and earth. I leave this place in your hands." Immortal Lord Hongshi paid no heed to the terrifying spectacle surrounding him and transmitted his voice to Li Fan. Then, he gazed into the distance toward the impact site of the black meteor and took a step forward. His figure flickered rapidly, vanishing from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. With the departure of Immortal Lord Hongshi, the cultivators who had just regained their composure became anxious again. Fortunately, Lord's secret envoy was still present, allowing them to retain some measure of reassurance. Li Fan, however, maintained a cold expression, staring intently at the center of Kongyan Sea, patiently waiting. Time passed slowly. As the first wave of black firestorm was completely repelled, the apocalyptic crisis seemed to have subsided. The once raging Kongyan Sea gradually calmed, leaving only the thick, sticky black substance clinging to the protective barrier, evidence of the catastrophe that had just unfolded. Yet, this unnatural calmness carried the ominous tension of an approaching storm. Li Fan sensed something was amiss. Ink flame isn't there. Sensing the rapid return of Immortal Lord Hongshi, Li Fan swept his gaze across the sky, then toward the deep sea. It seemed as though some terrifying calamity was brewing beneath the waves. Plop! A single air bubble suddenly surfaced. Then, a fish corpse, its belly upturned as if it had been boiled, floated to the surface. And then, in an instant, the entire Kongyan Sea seemed to boil. Countless bubbles surged violently, accompanied by the floating corpses of innumerable sea creatures. In past lifetimes, the crimson flame boiled the sea, taking more than a dozen years to completely incinerate the Kongyan Sea. Yet now, the ink flame had descended for less than half a day, and it had already brought the entire Kanyan Sea to a rolling boil. Billowing steam continuously surged upward, forming dense mist-like floating clouds above the sea. At this rate, in just a few days, the Kanyan Sea would be completely dried up. The difference between the crimson flame and the ink flame was evident at a glance. But compared to ink death's terrifying power that can obliterate everything, it's still somewhat lacking. Li Fan observed the churning, boiling sea below, contemplating silently. Just then, Immortal Lord Hongxi had already flown back. The earth veins. Without further words, he swiftly formed a series of complex hand seals, activating the heavenly origin transformation formation. The scene within the light screen shifted, and an enormous, glowing web appeared before everyone. Li Fan immediately noticed that the outermost edges of this web were already tainted black. Suddenly, realization dawned upon him. The ink flame had been utilizing the vast, ceaselessly flowing earth veins scattered throughout the Kanyan Sea, rapidly transmitting its scorching heat to every corner of the sea. No wonder it never showed itself. Not only is its martial strength on another level, but even its intelligence has evolved. Extract the earth veins and force it to reveal itself. Immortal Lord Hongxi's face flashed with a ruthless glint as he commanded coldly. The earth veins are the very foundation of the land. If they were damaged, the terrain of the entire region would be upheaved, potentially leading to unpredictable and eerie changes. It might even become completely uninhabitable for cultivators. This was an absolute last resort. Even if they survived the calamity, they would not escape the punishment of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. But at this moment, having already committed the act of slaughtering their own kin, the cultivators no longer cared about such consequences. The heavenly origin transformation formation, originally linked to various earth vein nodes, was now reversed, starting to extract power directly from the earth veins. Before long, a strange sound echoed in everyone's ears. It was as if the earth itself was toppling, mountains fracturing apart. The already boiling sea grew even more violent. The Kanyan Sea surged with monstrous waves, and dark storm clouds gathered from an unknown source, rolling in from the sky. The howling wind roared, the ocean trembled. Before the overwhelming might of heaven and earth, every cultivator in Kanyan City turned pale as death, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. However, infused with the yellowish earth vein power, the protective formation of Kanyan City became even more solid and unyielding. Amidst the world-shaking destruction, it stood firm like an unshakable fortress in a storm, offering a sliver of hope to the cultivators. The waves grew even fiercer. As the surface of the Kanyan Sea continued to recede, parts of the shallow seabed began to emerge. But unlike a normal seabed covered in sediment, this one was entirely shrouded in a layer of an unknown black substance. It was as if the rocks had been completely incinerated to ash. Even if we survive this disaster, it'll take at least several decades, maybe even centuries, for the Kanyan Sea to recover. Many cultivators, witnessing the scene, sighed in lament. Yet, seeing that the ink flame had still not revealed itself, Immortal Lord Hongxi hardened his resolve completely. Continue, do not stop. The rumbling sound of the seabed fracturing echoed as the heavenly origin transformation formation continued operating at full power. Boom! It seemed to have reached a critical threshold, as fiery magma suddenly erupted from the ocean floor. Then, as if triggering a chain reaction, volcanic flames burst forth across the entire Kanyan Sea, with lava shooting toward the sky. 1,000 fiery dragons soared, scorching the heavens and earth. Amid the distorted air, a figure half red and half black silently emerged beneath Kanyan City. So, you've finally come out. A flash of killing intent and greed flickered in Immortal Lord Hongxi's eyes before his figure vanished. In the next moment, he transformed into a continuous mountain range, encircling the entity at the center. That is, Crimson Flame, the spirit of heaven and earth, Crimson Flame. Witnessing the evolved form of Crimson Flame, the cultivators were all thrown into a frenzy. Even though they had already seen its terrifying power, capable of incinerating the sea with a mere gesture, it did nothing to quell their burning desire. So it wasn't a meteor catastrophe, but rather the descent of the spirit of heaven and earth. Indeed, this is a great opportunity. Sacrificing the spirit of heaven and earth can grant us an instant breakthrough to Tao integration. Within just a few breaths, the cultivators were consumed by greed. Some began rallying others to hunt down Crimson Flame together. Others, having completely lost their minds, rushed toward Crimson Flame like moths to a flame. As expected, before they could even approach, they were reduced to ashes by the intense heat. It's still crimson flame, not ink flame. Li Fan paid no heed to their deaths, instead fixating on the half-red, half-black mutated crimson flame, lost in thought. His clone felt the same surge of greed. However, unlike in previous lifetimes, where the mere sight of crimson flame nearly made him lose his sanity, this time was different. Without consciously activating the Xuanwang Immortal Heart mantra, the greed from his clone dissipated on its own. Like snow melting into water, it only caused faint ripples, leaving no real impact on him. Immortal techniques are truly extraordinary. Not only does my main body remain clear-minded, but even a clone thousands of miles away is unwavering. Li Fan sighed inwardly. Still, to avoid exposing himself, he feigned being deeply captivated by the spirit of heaven and earth, struggling to restrain himself. His eyes turned bloodshot, veins bulging, his body rigid. He wanted to see, where did immortal Lord Hongxi find the courage to face Crimson Flame alone? After all, in the previous life, even a weakened version of Crimson Flame had been too powerful. Hongxi and several other soul transformation cultivators together were no match for it. Let alone this black-red version in this life. Without some secret weapon, immortal Lord Hongxi would surely be instantly annihilated. But clearly, Hongxi was not a reckless fool. Under Li Fan's watchful gaze, Hongxi flew toward Crimson Flame. A towering mountain range materialized, momentarily trapping Crimson Flame. At the same time, Hongxi raised a small rectangular mirror and aimed it at Crimson Flame. That is, Li Fan's pupils contracted sharply. Xuantian sealing the spirit, Hongxi roared. A radiant blue light shot forth from the mirror, striking Crimson Flame directly. As if struck by a powerful gust of wind, Crimson Flame's translucent body flickered unsteadily. Yet despite its overwhelming might just moments ago, it was utterly powerless against this blue light. As though inherently restrained, a look of astonishment appeared on Crimson Flame's face, and its body froze instantly. A look of ecstasy surged onto Hongxi's face. This is bad. Li Fan's heart sank. Could it be that in this life, Hongxi will actually succeed in Dao integration so easily? He hadn't expected that after returning from the 10,000 Immortals Alliance headquarters, Immortal Lord Hongxi would wield such a terrifying weapon, the Xuantian sealing spirit. And in the face of this technique, the spirit of heaven and earth was unbelievably feeble. As the green pillar of light restrained Crimson Flame, countless thin threads split off from the mirror Hongxi held high. These threads, like long needles, pierced into Crimson Flame's body. Crimson Flame's black and red body trembled violently, like a flickering candle in the wind. Li Fan keenly noticed that the green threads seemed to be absorbing something. Crimson Flame's body was gradually shrinking, and its aura was continuously weakening. Crimson Flame struggled desperately to break free, but it was like an insect caught in a spider's web. The more he resisted, the tighter the threads wrapped around him. The massive green net firmly locked Crimson Flame in place. The sight of his current miserable state starkly contrasted with Li Fan's past life memories, where even in defeat, Crimson Flame had at least displayed the combat strength of a Dao integration powerhouse imbued with the power of the spirit of heaven and earth. The power of the spirit of heaven and earth comes from the heavens and the earth. The Xuantian spirit sealing formation, however, can replace the heavens and sever his connection to the world. No wonder Crimson Flame is so utterly powerless, Li Fan thought to himself as he observed Crimson Flame's tragic condition. But I wonder, will this formation be able to suppress ink death as well? If ink death is still sacrificed and refined, will the heavens respond by sending an even stronger incarnation of the spirit of heaven and earth? Just as everyone in Kongyan Sea thought the battle was already decided, a colossal hand suddenly emerged from beneath the ocean's surface. In the blink of an eye, the 5 fingers closed together, capturing both Hongxi and Crimson Flame in its grasp. Tianyang. Li Fan instantly recognized the origin of the giant hand. However, this time, Tianyang did not shout his signature phrase, Tianyang's life, never weaker than others. Instead, he had silently lurked beneath the battlefield, waiting for the perfect moment. Like a cunning predator, he had swooped in to capture them both in one fell swoop. You court death. Hongxi's expression changed drastically upon realizing Tianyang's ambush. He maintained the Xuantian spirit sealing formation while simultaneously commanding layers of mountain-like formations to crash into the 5 imprisoning fingers around him. Boom! To Hongxi's shock, the massive hand did not even attempt to resist his attack. It allowed the manifested mountains to crash into it directly. Yet, at the moment of impact, those towering peaks, indistinguishable from real mountains, shattered as if they had struck something 100 times harder. They crumbled into dust on the spot. Immortal Lord Hongshi's body trembled slightly. The immense counterforce almost caused him to lose control of the Schwantian spirit sealing formation. Sensing a glimmer of hope, Crimson Flame immediately ceased his struggles. Instead, he withdrew and conserved his strength, waiting for Hongxi to expose another opening. Damn it, Hongxi cursed under his breath after suffering an unexpected setback. He chose to momentarily ignore Tianyang's giant hand and instead focused all his efforts on the Schwantian spirit sealing formation, accelerating the refining of Crimson Flame. However, Tianyang, who had been greatly enhanced by Li Fan's relentless efforts, had evidently grown more intelligent. He was no longer just a brute relying on sheer force. The 5 fingers of the enormous hand suddenly turned crimson, as if molten lava flowed within them. Some of the lava even seeped from the puppet's body, freely circulating and forming intricate patterns. Like fiery dragons soaring through the air, these streams of lava swiftly arranged themselves into a complete formation, trapping both Hongxi and Crimson Flame within. The earth fire returned to origin formation. Li Fan's eyes flickered with sharp insight. It seems Tianyang's transformation is quite significant. He's no longer just relying on brute force but has actually learned to use formations. Hongxi was too greedy. He had plenty of time to evade while the formation was taking shape, but he refused to give up on the Spirit of heaven and earth he had already captured. Now, it's just a matter of who's faster. Will Hongxi drain and kill Crimson Flame first, advancing to the Dao integration realm? Or will Tianyang absorb Hongxi entirely and ascend to become a Dao integration immortal sage? With an amused expression, Li Fan watched the three-way standoff in the sky, ready to enjoy the show. However, some of the cultivators within Kongyan City could no longer sit still. The spirit of heaven and earth belongs to the virtuous. Fellow Taoists, the opportunity to defy fate and change destiny is right before our eyes. Encouraged and incited by those with ulterior motives, dozens, if not hundreds, of cultivators could not resist the temptation in their hearts. One after another, they launched attacks on the 3 who were locked in a standoff, hoping to become the lucky one who would reap the benefits and ascend to greatness in a single step. Li Fan noticed that He Zhenghao almost lost control as well. He had already flown forward, but for some reason, he suddenly came to his senses halfway and turned back. Wait a little longer, just a little longer. Li Fan heard him mumbling under his breath. His tightly shut eyes and trembling body clearly showed that he was desperately suppressing his own desires at this moment. Li Fan chuckled and shifted his gaze back to Tianyang and the others. The earth fire return to origin formation had already been pushed to its limit by Tianyang. Columns of magma erupted continuously from the seabed beneath Kongyan, forming a spectacular scene of fire dragons surging through the ocean. Li Fan knew that Tianyang was exerting his full strength to harness the power of the Kongyan earth fire. Ordinarily, earth fire was bound to and restricted by the earth's veins, making it nearly impossible for cultivators to control it so easily. However, earlier, in order to force out Crimson Flame, Immortal Lord Hongxi had activated the Heavenly Origin Transformation Formation, completely destroying the earth veins of Kongyan Sea. As a result, the earth fire magma lost its restraints and raged like a wild horse, allowing the earth fire return to origin formation to function at twice its normal effectiveness. From a certain perspective, this was a case of cause and effect. Immortal Lord Hongxi was digging his own grave. Noticing that his energy was depleting even faster than Crimson Flame's, Hongxi's expression kept shifting. At this moment, if he withdrew the Schwantian sealing spirit mirror and gave up suppressing Crimson Flame, focusing entirely on the situation at hand, he might be able to escape from the earth fire return to origin formation. However, the Schwantian sealing spirit mirror could only be used once. After activation, the mirror would turn into an ordinary object. To use it again, he would have to return to the 10,000 Immortals Alliance headquarters to request a recharge. This meant that if he interrupted the process now, all his previous efforts would be wasted. He might be able to save his life, but achieving Dao integration, that would be out of the question. On the other hand, if he fought to the death, there was indeed the risk of losing his life, but there was also a chance of breaking through to the Dao integration realm. If he succeeded, the heavens and earth would be vast before him, and his fate would be forever changed. With a ferocious expression, Immortal Lord Hongxi made his final decision in an instant. Blazing streaks of light shot out from his body, attacking the earth fire return to origin formation, attempting to slow down his own refinement and absorption process. Meanwhile, Hongxi's eyes were filled with unwavering determination. He cast aside all distractions, focusing solely on controlling the Schwantian spirit sealing formation to suppress and refine Crimson Flame. Time passed, second by second. Crimson Flame's body grew dimmer and dimmer. It had become almost completely transparent, as if it could disappear from the world at any moment. Die for me, Hongxi roared, transforming into a golden brown beam of light and charging at Crimson Flame without hesitation. At the same time, the Xuantian spirit sealing formation erupted with its most dazzling radiance. Green and yellow intertwined like a sharp blade, about to pierce fiercely into Crimson Flame's body. Chapter 648. At that moment, Crimson Flame, who had seemingly given up struggling and was silently awaiting death, suddenly lifted his head. On his blurred and flickering face, a mocking smile seemed to emerge. Then, in an instant, his body, originally a mix of black and red, turned completely pitch black. Like ink dripping into a pool of water, the surrounding space was instantly dyed into a deep darkness. Li Fan's mind trembled violently. Even the surviving cultivators, who had once gazed at Crimson Flame with greed in their hearts, were now completely engulfed in fear. Because what they sensed as the spirit of heaven and earth, Crimson Flame had, without warning, transformed into the spirit of heaven and earth, Ink Death. What is happening? Not only were the onlookers overwhelmed with panic, but even Li Fan himself was filled with shock. The spirit of heaven and earth can switch between one another. Ink Death can replace Crimson Flame instantly without requiring his death. Li Fan's heartbeat accelerated, his mind racing. What he witnessed today felt as though it had opened a completely new door before him. Amid this sudden and drastic change, Hongxi, who had just risked everything in a desperate strike, was the first to bear the brunt of it. His once resolute and determined expression turned into sheer terror and despair. But there was no turning back, the arrow had already left the bow. He could no longer stop himself as he charged straight into the ink-black domain surrounding Ink Death. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no dazzling bursts of light. There was only the soundless dissolution, like snowflakes melting into water, as Hongxi's entire body disappeared without a trace. Ink Death tilted his head slightly, the corners of his mouth curling into an eerie smile. Above, the sky gave birth to a strange phenomenon. Soul Transformation Cultivator Hongxi, 763 years of cultivation. Established his Tao foundation through the Five Elements Mountain. Formed his golden core with the laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Devoured the 100-ridge cave heaven to condense his nascent soul. Drew from Taihua's 1,000 rising peaks to transform his soul. Now, struck by divine retribution, his Tao vanishes, returning to the heavens. The sky trembled as vast mountain ranges collapsed, signifying the fall of Immortal Lord Hongxi, the once dominant nascent soul cultivator of the Cloud Sea region. From the moment Ink Death appeared, Tianyang had already sensed the danger. Although he had vowed never to be weaker than anyone in his lifetime, that did not mean he would throw his life away in vain. Without hesitation, he activated the Earth Fire Return to Origin formation to its full extent, sacrificing the integrity of the formation to trigger a massive eruption. As the Earth's molten lava raged, Tianyang attempted to sever his own hand and escape. Even as his severed hand remained to restrain Ink Death, his true body had already begun to flee in secret. However, no matter how fast he was still slower than Ink Death. The blazing lava had not even reached Ink Death before it was tainted, transformed into fine, pitch-black particles. Like a drop of ink falling into the world, the darkness spread rapidly. Tianyang had barely gotten far before the ever-expanding ink-black domain caught up to him. Unlike Hongxi, who had been silently dissolved, Tianyang's demise was accompanied by crackling flames and agonizing creaks that echoed from within the darkness. Even as the inky void spread further outward, signs of Tianyang's desperate struggle could still be faintly seen in the center. But in the end, it seemed only to prolong his suffering. Before long, all disturbances ceased completely, the pitch-black domain fell into an eerie stillness. Li Fan's eyelids twitched violently. He had fortified Tianyang's body with materials, including the legendary Eternal Tribulation Gold, said to be indestructible across countless calamities. Originally, he had hoped that Tianyang might at least endure a couple of exchanges against Ink Death. But the result, the gap is simply too vast. Ink Death is truly terrifying. Even though Li Fan had witnessed battles between Heavenly Doctor, the Grand Sage, and others, the sight of Ink Death's power still sent a chill through his heart. And this time, Ink Death seems even more alive than before. He wasn't sure if it was just his imagination, but as he stared at that ever-expanding abyss of darkness in the sky, a strange realization dawned upon him. As for the other cultivators in Kanyan City, they were not merely feeling a slight chill like Li Fan. The sudden turn of events had left them in complete despair. In the blink of an eye, the two soul transformation cultivators, who had once seemed to hold the upper hand, had both fallen. The remaining survivors could only tremble in fear, their hearts sinking into the abyss of hopelessness. Meanwhile, in Kanyan City, many cultivators who had been secluding themselves within the Tianshuan mirror were suddenly cast out. They wore expressions of utter bewilderment, having no inkling of what was happening. Even the Tianshuan mirror has withdrawn its bestowed power, it appears to have abandoned the Kanyan Sea. What is meant to come will come. Li Fan looked around at the cultivators, crying out in despair and exposing their pitiable state, and thought as such. After the fall of Tianyang, the spreading of the ink traces gradually slowed. Reappearing in human form, Ink Death's gaze swept over everyone in Kanyan City. Every cultivator who came under his stare found their bodies suddenly stiffened and immobilized, their hearts plunged into profound terror. Then, perhaps in a mischievous, cat-and-mouse manner, Ink Death did not immediately attack these cultivators, instead, he flickered away, vanishing without a trace. The cultivators, their faces awash with disbelief, assumed that Ink Death had spared them. In that moment, a spark of hope ignited within their hearts. But clearly, that hope was in vain. High above, black rain began to fall. As the droplets descended to the ground, everything they touched was rendered insubstantial. Soon after, an inky substance, of the same origin, surged forth from the void, devouring everything in its path. Under the watchful eyes of all, the Kanyan Sea was slowly disappearing. Ironically, every drop of the black rain avoided the airborne Kanyan City, as if to punish the cultivators inside, forcing them to witness the gradual erasure of the Kanyan Sea. Ink Death orchestrated it all. This Ink Death sure has a twisted sense of humor, Li Fan mused while staring at the increasingly dark surroundings, his heart growing ever heavier. The horrifying scene drove the cultivators of Kanyan City into complete madness. Realizing that they had no hope of survival, some resorted to self-destruction, ending their own lives. Others, with eyes blazing red, unleashed lethal attacks toward the pitch-black expanse outside the city. Still others collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. He Zhenghao was among them. His body trembled incessantly as his daughter's earlier counsel echoed in his mind. A terrible calamity, a threat to life. All you need to do is leave the Kanyan Sea. With a look of bewilderment and regret on his face, images of his beloved Heng Ruoshui and his daughter He Xingxin materialized before him. I have been so foolish. A cascade of memories, like a revolving lantern, flashed through his mind, and He Zhenghao wept bitterly. But then, suddenly, he stopped and bolted in Li Fan's direction. Esteemed secret envoy, please, you must come up with a solution. You surely have some way, don't you? Crawling and stumbling, he reached Li Fan's side, clinging to his last shred of hope as he pleaded. Li Fan offered no reply, he silently soared upward into the sky. With a provocative stance aimed at the pitch-black realm beyond Kanyan City, the inky darkness of the heavens and earth seemed to come to an abrupt standstill. Then, a figure appeared not far from Li Fan, watching him with keen interest. Chapter 649. Ink Death and Li Fan, separated by the protective light shield of Kanyan City's heavenly origin transformation formation, regarded each other from afar. Their standoff instantly captured the attention of all the surviving cultivators. Although it was hard to believe that the secret envoy could contend with the terrifying spirit of heaven and earth, before him, a force that had so easily slain two soul transformation stage cultivators, the aura of mystery and the incredible legends surrounding Li Fan, the cultivator of the ancient heavenly mechanism sect, inevitably rekindled a glimmer of hope in their hearts. Under the gaze of countless onlookers, Li Fan stood with his arms folded, his voice thundering. How dare you, mere fragments of the spirit of heaven and earth, act so presumptuously? Although my cultivation has not yet been fully restored, I will not tolerate your insolence in my presence. Enhanced deliberately by his spiritual power, his voice boomed and echoed throughout Kanyan City. Coupled with his transcendent, solitary demeanor, his domineering words truly exuded the aura of an unparalleled master. While the cultivators of Kanyan City were rendered silent, Ink Death's reaction was noticeably subtle. The true nature of Li Fan's clone was, of course, not hidden from Ink Death. Yet even he had not expected that a cultivator at the Golden Core stage could not only overcome his inner greed and fear but also dare to speak so impertinently to him. Clearly, such a feat was beyond the capabilities of an ordinary cultivator. Doubting his own judgment, Ink Death stood momentarily stunned, as if Li Fan's words had struck him with overwhelming force. Lord Secret Envoy is mighty. Cheers erupted throughout Kongyun City. But Li Fan paid no heed, his expression grave as he lightly pointed toward where Ink Death stood. Flying Star, he commanded, his voice cold and lethal, utterly devoid of emotion. Then, a small point of light appeared within the pitch-black domain surrounding Ink Death and soon burst forth with brilliant radiance. An extremely terrifying force erupted from that light. Under the shroud of white light, the dense, inky darkness began to fade and dissipate. As space twisted and trembled, it seemed that a towering, tumultuous wave was rising from the sea of darkness. Ink Death's body swayed incessantly, like leaves trembling in a wild, gusty wind. In that instant, all the surviving cultivators, including He Zhenghao, were profoundly shaken. The might of the secret envoy was indeed fearsome. This never-before-seen divine technique, known as Flying Star, was utterly terrifying, so much so that even Ink Death found it hard to withstand. As they caught sight of a renewed glimmer of hope, the onlookers were both shocked and elated. However, among everyone present, only Li Fan knew that it was all but an illusion. He did not actually possess any Flying Star divine technique. The dazzling white light that appeared at his fingertips was merely the effect of the self-detonation of the Immortal City Cave, a remarkable treasure imbued with countless precious materials, including annihilating thunder of oblivion. The Immortal City Cave itself was no ordinary artifact. Moreover, during its construction, Li Fan had ordered Zhou Kebao to incorporate various lethal modifications. When it detonated at its extreme, even a cultivator at the Dao integration stage, caught off guard, would suffer severe injuries. Of course, Ink Death's power was far beyond that of ordinary Dao integration cultivators. Thus, this seemingly formidable, Flying Star, could not truly harm Ink Death, it would at most only cause him a bit of trouble. Li Fan was well aware of this, his intention was merely to delay Ink Death for a moment. Only then would he unleash his trump card. Under the cover of the dazzling white light, Li Fan silently retrieved a 5-faced, 10-armed statue, and after uttering his final words to it, fiercely, he hurled it toward Ink Death. The secret technique sky-shrouding hand enveloped the battlefield, while the heaven-shattering heart sword unleashed an endless cascade of sword light, concealing the surroundings. Myriad phenomena. As Li Fan roared in fury, the 5 faces, 10 hands, and the manifested heavenly sovereign form had already arrived before Ink Death. Faced with repeated provocations from a mere golden core cultivator, the killing intent in Ink Death's heart had reached its peak. He decided to stop playing this game of cat and mouse. Endless black particles coalesced into a black dragon, surging toward the incoming sword light of Li Fan, determined to annihilate this insolent challenger. In an instant, as the black tide engulfed everything, the sword light imbued with the heaven-shattering heart sword was forcibly transformed. Immediately afterward, the wriggling black particles launched a direct attack on the manifested heavenly sovereign form. In the next moment, the 5 faces, 10 hands shattered with a deafening explosion. A jade-like delicate arm suddenly emerged, slashing a sword toward Ink Death. A robed man's phantom figure lightly waved a dust whisk toward him. A scholar-dressed white-robed cultivator flung an ancient wooden scroll at Ink Death. A sleeping infant, with eyes closed, let out a series of wailing cries. A golden talisman sheet, light as a feather, descended upon Ink Death with crushing weight. Now is the moment. Li Fan's clone's eyes shone with brilliance as he crushed a storage ring filled with an immense quantity of Kunpeng essence blood and hundreds of beast soul beads, meticulously crafted within an empire's small world. In an instant, waves of blood surged, and demonic aura soared skyward. A misty purple energy immediately descended from the horizon. Still not enough. Li Fan then unsealed the divine ability Kun Devours from within his true body's core, activating the heaven-devouring earth-eating technique, wildly absorbing the countless top-grade spirit stones stored within the ring. With this surge, he charged toward the already overstretched limit of his bottleneck, Calamity of Heaven. Demonic heretic. Just as the western winds carried the purple aura, a cold and merciless voice from senior brother Zhang rang out. Sensing that Li Fan's clone was about to shatter the heaven's limit, a colossal hand suddenly emerged across the celestial sky. Aren't you all fond of hiding in the shadows and scheming? This time, I'll make you tear each other apart. A manic expression flashed across Li Fan's clone as his golden core exploded with a thunderous roar. His human body disintegrated inch by inch, yet his flesh, empowered by immense force, did not immediately disperse. Eyes filled with a savage glow, his fingers danced rapidly in the void. Before his form could collapse entirely, he wrote a single character, Chaos Luan. This sequence of actions had already been rehearsed countless times in Li Fan's mind. Though it appeared to span an eternity, it all transpired in a single instant. Myriad phenomena. Li Fan's cold shout still echoed in the air. As the sword light vanished and the shattered manifested heavenly sovereign form faded, 5 distinct figures emerged. Ink Death, who had been brimming with killing intent, now showed a flicker of surprise on his face. However, he would not retreat. A boundless black tide surged, colliding with the divine abilities unleashed by the 5 longevity immortal sovereigns. Then, another purple lightning bolt tore through the void, striking directly into their battlefield. The colossal celestial hand in the sky remained indifferent to the chaos below and continued to press downward with overwhelming might. Meanwhile, Li Fan's final technique, sacrificing his clone to cast the chaos mantra, plunged the battlefield into even greater turmoil and eerie unpredictability. With so many unforeseen variables arriving in an instant, for the first time, a trace of shock appeared on Ink Death's face. Yet he still did not retreat. The dark tide raged, surging into a towering tsunami, engulfing everything in its path. In an unknown space, 5 statues with indistinct faces stood in a circle. Their heads were lowered, gazing at the center. There, a massive glowing cloud floated in the air. Within the cloud, faint miniature landscapes of land, mountains, and flowing rivers could be seen. The cloud was divided into isolated regions of various sizes, with each region containing a tiny floating point of light. At the edge of this luminous cloud, in a small blue area, black specks were writhing and shifting. Suddenly, in an instant, this region erupted with various brilliant lights. Then, as if a violent explosion had occurred, faint tremors rippled outward, spreading across the surrounding cloud. Like clouds swayed by the wind, the luminous cloud flickered and shifted gently. Soon after, from the turbulent area at the cloud's edge, a vast swath of blackness surged forth. In a flash, it engulfed everything. As if some unseen entity had taken a single bite, the entire region was swallowed up in an instant, vanishing entirely from the glowing mass. At the same time, apart from the statue in the center, whose eyes remained closed and head bowed, the other 4 statues suddenly opened their eyes. They all gazed at the now void region. A strange atmosphere filled the space. Fellow Taoist Yi Xin, what do you think? Hee, my eyes were dazzled by the flash, I can't see clearly. Some force has disrupted our perception. Wait, could this be? Indeed, impossible. The space fell into silence. It seemed they were sensing something. After a long while, a voice broke the silence again. Besides chaos, there's also Xuanwang celestial palm, purple cloud dharma body. The Xuanwang realm hasn't been this lively in a long time. I do hope this keeps happening, Senior Sister Zhao said lazily. The other 3 ignored her. Each of us was drawn into activating a divine ability. It must be related to that entity we made a deal with through the heaven-suppressing alliance. Zhou Qingong, Li Fan. Are they all dead? Hey, how interesting. These are mere trivial matters, it could just be a distraction meant to catch our attention. The real issue is, why has chaos reappeared in the Xuanwang realm? I'll have my subordinates investigate, but we shouldn't place too much hope in it. There's something unusual about this. That old geezer immortal ancestor seems to have disappeared again recently. Oh, that reminds me of something amusing, hee. As the conversation continued, the 5 statues eventually closed their eyes once more. Silence returned to the space. Tianling Prefecture. Looking toward the Kongyan Sea in the distance, the vision in Li Fan's mind suddenly cut off. He remained silent, focusing his senses. He detected no imminent danger. After a long time, he finally let out a breath and flew swiftly toward the location of the Longevity Valley. As I expected, the manifested heavenly sovereign statue isn't just a simple communication tool linked to the 5 Elders Association. Senior Sister Zhao, the robed cultivator, the scholar, the infant, and that invisible golden parchment. They must correspond to the longevity immortal heavenly sovereigns of the 5 Elders Association. Li Fan's eyes flickered with thought. As the most valuable artifact obtained from his dealings with the 5 Elders Association, he refused to believe that the heavenly sovereign statue was merely a transmission device. Even his own soul fragment jade slip carried a trace of his divine sense, after all. Therefore, although the 5 Elders Association did not explicitly state it, Li Fan still speculated that the heavenly sovereign statue must contain some of the power of the 5 longevity immortal heavenly sovereigns. Using it to deceive others while simultaneously testing Mo Sha's true strength was a perfect strategy. I just don't know whether, after using the manifested heavenly sovereign statue in this way, my final request, that the Five Elders Association hide my identity, command Samantabhadra true boat, sneak into the 10,000 Immortals Alliance through the White Mist Barrier, and create chaos across various locations, will be granted. Li Fan pondered silently. According to the Five Elders Association spies, orders from the manifested heavenly sovereign statue were almost equivalent to a decree from the heavenly sovereigns themselves. As long as it did not threaten the rule of the Five Elders Association, it would be strictly carried out. However, since it had only been a short time since the peace negotiations between the Five Elders Association and the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, and given that Li Fan had essentially tricked the Five Elders Association, it was uncertain whether all his orders would be implemented. No matter what, my goal has already been achieved. With so many forces erupting at once and the chaos technique further stirring the pot, everything has turned into an unsolvable mess. Even if someone wants to investigate, they likely won't have the means to do so. Restored to his original appearance, Li Fan thought to himself. The former cultivator of the Heavenly Mechanism sect, Li Fan, is already dead. The only one who exists now is just an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. Li Fan knew that his mysterious death and the sudden disappearance of billions of contribution points from his account would undoubtedly raise many suspicions. But, so what? He was already dead, and he had died on a battlefield surrounded by powerful figures. How could they investigate? Who would dare investigate? Most likely, the matter would be quietly dismissed. As long as I hide in Longevity Valley for a while longer, all of this will be forgotten. By then, even if I openly proclaim myself as Li Fan, it probably won't cause much of a stir. Li Fan's eyes gleamed as he sped toward Longevity Valley. After about half a month, he finally arrived at his destination. Within the essence-devouring white mist, he located the markings left behind by Elder Lu, broke through the seal, and finally entered Longevity Valley. A surge of dense wood attribute spiritual energy washed over him, making Li Fan unconsciously squint his eyes in comfort. Young master, you've arrived. Sensing Li Fan's aura, Lu San hurried over to greet him. Was everything successful? He asked. Li Fan nodded but did not elaborate. Since Lu San trusted Li Fan deeply, he refrained from asking further questions. For the next few years, we will focus on laying low. Unless necessary, do not venture outside. Our priority is refining the longevity pill, Li Fan declared, setting the course of action for the near future. Lu San immediately agreed. Apart from the longevity pill, I have found several other medicinal pills that could also fetch a high price, Lu San suggested. I noticed that new method cultivators tend to have highly volatile emotions. Since Longevity Valley has all the necessary herbs, I can take some time to refine the Supreme Emotionless Pill. Lu San then explained the pill's effects to Li Fan. It was quite similar to Blue Flame, which Li Fan had previously used. This pill would allow its user to maintain an almost absolute state of rationality. Not only could it enhance combat performance by up to 200%, but it also had miraculous effects in breaking bottlenecks and achieving enlightenment. Li Fan was very pleased with this. Elder Lu, you are absolutely right. This pill will surely be well received in the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. However, do not overly pursue high-quality versions. Try to refine ones with lower medicinal potency instead, Li Fan instructed. Oh, right. As if remembering something, Li Fan began introducing Lu San and the others to the existence of the fallen immortal realm. Read extra chapters on greater than Spirit Stone translation. A single glance reflects 10,000 years, and after falling, one becomes a world of their own. How is this possible? Lu San was shocked by the unbelievable reality that Li Fan had just described. How could the Xuanwang realm have a true immortal? Why have we never heard of such a thing? Even as a Dao integration expert, upon hearing of the existence of the fallen immortal realm, Lu San's reaction was no better than Li Fan's. Li Fan smiled and said, Elder Lu, there is no need for doubt. This matter is absolutely true, I have personally experienced it. What my eyes saw was exactly as it was back then. Truly the work of a true immortal. He shook his head, full of emotion. Hearing this, Lu San was completely convinced, but his heart grew even more astonished. Suddenly, as if he had realized something, his eyes flashed with excitement. Young master, you just said that the fallen immortal realm is a true projection of the ancient Xuanwang realm. Does that mean that the Medicine King sect from back then still exists within it? The old sect master, even you and me, as well as all the other cultivators of the Medicine King sect. During our exploration, is it possible that we might encounter them? Lu San's voice trembled as he slowly asked. Li Fan pondered for a moment before nodding, giving him a definite answer. Throughout the history of the Xuanwang realm, there were indeed cases where ancient slumbering cultivators entered the fallen immortal realm and encountered another version of themselves. However, strange phenomena such as, the two cannot meet, or, a mutual resonance, never occurred. At the end of the day, when ancient cultivators arrived in the present, everything from the past was already gone. The fallen immortal realm merely contained a projection of their past selves at a certain moment in time. Other than evoking feelings of nostalgia and sentimentality, seeing another version of oneself was no different from encountering any other being. Likewise, the natives of the fallen immortal realm would not mistake outsiders who entered as mere projections of the past. Even if their appearance and aura were exactly the same, it wouldn't matter. They would simply assume it was some kind of illusionary technique. However, Li Fan had once come across a discussion in the Seeking Immortals section of the Tianquan Mirror. It speculated that if a cultivator survived from ancient times to the present and reached an unimaginably profound level of cultivation, they might achieve something called eternal presence, timeless freedom. The so-called eternal presence referred to a cultivator transcending the river of time, allowing them to exist simultaneously in the past, present, and future. Every instance of themselves across time would be the same transcendent being. If such a cultivator projected into the fallen immortal realm, their projection and true self might indeed be considered one and the same. Though this was only a theoretical concept, it represented the ultimate pursuit of the Tao for cultivators, making it a topic of much fascination. Some cultivators further argued that if such a being truly existed, they would have long since reversed cause and effect, turning time itself into an unbroken cycle. How could they possibly be captured by a mere glance from a true immortal and drawn into the fallen immortal realm? Thus, the idea that the fallen immortal realm's projections were actually the true selves of people from reality remained a paradox. Li Fan roughly explained these ideas to Lu San. Though Lu San nodded on the surface, appearing reassured, he was still eager to enter the fallen immortal realm and see for himself. Seeing this, Li Fan didn't mind. He simply shook his head with a faint smile and then carefully explained the ritual procedure to Lu San. Blessings to the celestial venerable of Xuanwang. Without hesitation, Lu San activated the ritual before Li Fan and entered the fallen immortal realm. Li Fan, however, narrowed his eyes slightly and gazed toward the sky. Perhaps due to his recent breakthrough in the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, his perception had become far keener than before. At the very moment Lu San's strand of divine consciousness vanished, Li Fan clearly sensed a shadow fleeting across the heavens of the real world. That was no illusion, the fallen immortal realm, The shadow disappeared from his perception in an instant, but Li Fan's gaze lingered on the sky for a long time. Li Fan had spent a long time wandering in the Seeking Immortals forum and knew that many cultivators had attempted to find traces of the fallen immortal realm in the real world. However, it was said that without exception, they all failed. They only knew of its existence and how to enter it. But they could never observe it. Yet now, Li Fan, who was merely at the nascent soul stage, had unexpectedly broken this pattern. My previous experiences in the fallen immortal realm were different from others. I kept reliving certain scenarios in an endless cycle. I never understood the reason before. But now, it seems that it might be closely tied to the Xuanwang mantra. The true immortal's legacy, the remnants of a true immortal's will, maybe there really is some connection between the two. It's been a long time since I entered the fallen immortal realm. I hope that with the blessing of the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra this time, I'll receive some surprises. Li Fan pondered silently. However, he did not act immediately. While waiting for Lu San to wake up, he took a stroll around Longevity Valley. The valley was divided into separate areas by formations, each dedicated to growing different types of spiritual herbs. As expected from a secret realm sealed for 1,000 years, even with the formations isolating the area, Li Fan could still feel the abundant vitality emanating from the spiritual fields. From time to time, cultivators from the Medicine King sect moved through the valley, using secret techniques to select and harvest the appropriate materials for alchemy. In the distant open area, he could vaguely see several half-constructed buildings taking shape. That was the new Medicine King sect headquarters, being built under Fang Ziji's command. Quite an imposing sight, Li Fan nodded in admiration. With the Kongyansi conflict settled, it was time to plan for the future. His main objectives were twofold. First, he needed to find a way to obtain the latter part of the mountain-sitting technique beyond the nascent soul stage. Since the 10,000 Immortal Alliance had not yet enacted the plan of the Heavenly Sovereign of Reality and Illusion, to lure out hidden spies, the Five Elders Association had not been forced to send a Dao integration powerhouse as a test. As a result, the great battle between the two sides, the scheme against immortal sage Jicheng, and his impending death due to lifespan exhaustion had not yet occurred. Therefore, if Li Fan wanted to acquire the Audience Law Jade plaque, the key to access Law Derivation Jade, he would need to find another method. Fortunately, he had already made preparations, so this wasn't a major concern. His second goal was to accumulate experience and insights for advancing to the soul transformation stage. The nascent soul stage was essentially the process of cultivating and perfecting one's cave heaven domain, while the gap between nascent soul and soul transformation was the key dividing line in a cultivator's actual combat power. Take, for example, Immortal Lord Hongxi, who had perished in the Kongyansi calamity. He built his Dao foundation through the Five Elements Mountain and achieved Golden Core using the 5 elemental laws: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. His talent was undeniable, and his initial path was smooth. However, when it came to the crucial stages of seizing the essence of heaven and earth to form a nascent soul, and extracting the marrow of heaven and earth to obtain divine soul transformation, his promising future took a drastic downturn. His so-called 100 Ridges Cave Heaven, and Taihua giving birth to 1,000 mountains, were clearly far inferior in strength. As a result, Immortal Lord Hongxi's combat power remained unimpressive. He spent his entire life trapped in the remote Kongyansi, and breaking through any further was nearly impossible. On the other hand, if Immortal Lord Hongxi had managed to cultivate the 5 elements Great Cave Heaven to achieve nascent soul, how far could his potential have taken him? Read extra chapters on greater than Spirit Stone translation. Chapter 652. With the 5 elements Great Cave Heaven as a foundation, even if the marrow of heaven that Hongxi extracted during his soul transformation was unremarkable, his achievements would still be incomparable to today's standards. Was it because he didn't want to? No, it was simply because he couldn't. If rare treasures and heavenly laws could be obtained through personal effort, then at least there would still be some chance to strive for them. However, by the time a cultivator reaches the nascent soul or soul transformation stage, acquiring a powerful and precious cave heaven world or heavenly marrow is no longer just about diligence. Without a strong family background, sufficient resources, or extraordinary luck, how could one compete with other cultivators? For an ordinary cultivator, simply securing enough resources to break through is already a great fortune. They have no luxury to pick and choose. Take Di Jinglin, for example. He decisively abandoned the opportunity for Dao integration when faced with the temptation of the spirit of heaven and earth. Of course, this was partly because he was a peerless genius who looked down on the weak spirit of heaven and earth. However, it was also because, as a high-ranking member of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, the resources and knowledge he controlled were beyond the reach of ordinary cultivators. The strong can afford to be selective about their path to immortality, carefully weighing every choice, making them even stronger. Meanwhile, the weak must seize every rare opportunity for advancement, barely scraping by, thus, the weak remain weak. This is why, from the nascent soul realm onward, the gap between individual cultivators grows increasingly vast. Even within the same realm, instant defeat in battle is not unheard of. Now, with his breakthrough through the 5 elements Great Cave Heaven, Li Fan has already reached the pinnacle of the nascent soul realm. But when it comes to finding a marrow of heaven that matches his cultivation, he is still completely lost. What is the marrow of heaven? Long Juyuan used the Heavenly Spirit's 1,000 waters to achieve soul transformation. Hongxi relied on Taihua's 1,000 mountains to break through. From the heaven and earth notices issued upon their deaths, some clues can be inferred. Just as human marrow produces blood, marrow of heaven produces laws. When a new law appears in the Xuanwang world, it manifests as a change in nature, the heaven and earth undergoes transformation. In Tianling Prefecture, thousands of rivers will form over the next few millennia. In Taihua Prefecture, thousands of mountains will rise in the coming ages. These are preordained, inevitable changes in Xuanwang world over a certain region and period. Extracting the marrow of heaven means taking the fundamental laws that drive these natural transformations and drawing them into oneself. By channeling the immense power of heaven and earth, one can achieve an enormous leap in cultivation and battle prowess. Furthermore, the initial fusion of heavenly laws within one's body lays the groundwork for the Tao integration stage, when a cultivator must sacrifice the spirit of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth transformations take tens of thousands of years. With ordinary perception, cultivators wouldn't even notice them. But under the new heavenly sovereign laws, one can detect even the subtlest changes, first tearing open a gap, then continuously drawing in and absorbing the world's originally slow-releasing source power at an accelerated rate. Though this greatly depletes the world's potential, for cultivators, it provides a rapid surge in strength. Li Fan's mind raced, analyzing everything he had learned. The 5 elements cave heaven is self-sustaining, forming a perfect cycle. It is a rare and precious opportunity. If I advance to soul transformation and extract the marrow of heaven, it must be related to this. However, the 5 elements, when manifest in the world, tend to disperse. A single type of marrow of heaven will likely correspond to only one elemental attribute. Attempting to cultivate multiple laws at the soul transformation stage, like during the golden core stage, is far more difficult. Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Beyond law creation, marrow of heaven also possesses immunity and resistance mechanisms. Once a cultivator has absorbed a particular marrow of heaven, attempting to extract another will trigger resistance from the world itself, leading to rejection. The more one masters, the greater the repelling force. With each additional type, the difficulty increases almost exponentially. So, for the vast majority of cultivators in this world, extracting even a single type of marrow of heaven is already the limit. Even someone as powerful as Long Juyuan, who could single-handedly battle the spirit of heaven and earth and ascend to Tao integration, faced the same challenge. This alone shows how difficult it is. I'm afraid I can, at most, accommodate only 2 types of marrow of heaven at the same time, Li Fan thought to himself, not blindly overestimating his abilities. To achieve a perfect breakthrough, unless... A sharp glint flashed in Li Fan's eyes. Extracting 5 different types of marrow of heaven simultaneously and utilizing the principle of mutual generation and restriction to achieve self-balancing. This was undoubtedly an outlandish idea. Not to mention the rarity of encountering an opportunity to extract 5 types of marrow of heaven at once. Even if such an opportunity arose, the chances of success would be minuscule. Any rational cultivator would never attempt such a thing. However, for Li Fan, it was not entirely impossible to try. In his mind, the Tao deviation stone continuously emitted a soft blue glow, systematically integrating all the information he had ever come across, slowly deducing a potential method to realize his idea. More than 10 days later, Li Fan sensed Lu San awakening. His figure flickered, and he appeared in front of him. It seemed that Lu San had spent an incredibly long time in the fallen immortal realm. Just as he returned to the real world, he was still somewhat unaccustomed to it. A hint of confusion flashed in his eyes. However, the moment he saw Li Fan, that trace of bewilderment quickly faded. Young master, Lu San stood up, his expression calm and composed. How was it? Did you encounter the alchemists from the Medicine King sect of the past? Li Fan asked kindly. Lu San shook his head. Strangely enough, the scene I experienced this time in the fallen immortal realm was not the ancient cultivation world you described, young master. Instead, it was a time and space I had never heard of before. In that world, immortal arts had been completely severed, and no cultivators existed anymore. The only way people could wield extraordinary powers was by resonating with ancient artifacts left behind from ages past. They were called something like divine weapon wielders. And this time, the person I possessed was merely a little brat, no more than 7 or 8 years old. As Lu San recalled the experience, he narrated everything to Li Fan. In the end, after enduring countless hardships and experiencing endless bloodshed and slaughter, I finally managed to resonate with the legendary strongest divine weapon. The Immortal Execution Sword. As he spoke, Lu San took out a long sword that radiated a dazzling 7-colored light, yet seemed to exude an endless aura of slaughter. Li Fan's gaze sharpened, but after taking a closer look, he couldn't help but chuckle. Lu San then remarked, quite the grand name. But in truth, it's nothing more than a natal flying sword forged by a nascent soul stage sword cultivator. It only stood out among a pile of so-called divine weapons, because it happened to be tainted with a wisp of a fallen cultivator's lingering soul. Lu San glanced at the flying sword before him with some disdain and commented, "The forging technique is crude, and the material is extremely ordinary. What a piece of junk." With that, he applied a slight force. The so-called strongest divine weapon, the Immortal execution sword, instantly crumbled into dust. "That was quite an interesting experience," Li Fan said with a slight smile after listening. In the fallen immortal realm, apart from the original world, there are countless other derivative time spaces. This time was just a matter of bad luck. If you still want to try your luck, Elder Lu, you can enter again after some time, Li Fan explained. Lu San let out a long sigh and said, "I've come to terms with it. The past is gone. Even if I were to see him again, so what? In the eyes of the sect master, I am no longer that loyal old servant. I will leave it to fate. It's better to focus my energy on reviving the Medicine King sect. There are countless opportunities within the fallen immortal realm. Why not let the disciples try their luck as well? Otherwise, keeping them from going out for so long will stifle them," Lu San suddenly suggested. Li Fan had no objections. Over the next period, the people of the Medicine King sect devoted themselves wholeheartedly to building their new sect within Longevity Valley. The general layout still followed that of the former Medicine King sect, with structures rising one after another. Seeing the familiar scene slowly taking shape again before them, Lu San and the disciples were filled with excitement and joy. Meanwhile, outside their world, something unexpected occurred. To Li Fan's surprise, the destruction of Kongyan did not cause much of a stir. Logically speaking, the complete annihilation of an entire region should have been an event that cultivators would discuss for a long time. However, in this lifetime, perhaps due to the sheer magnitude of the disaster, both the suppression of information and the speed at which people forgot the catastrophe far surpassed previous cycles. Li Fan disguised himself as a passerby and gathered some information, only to find that in less than a month, memories of the countless beings within Kongyan had faded from the world. Even if someone occasionally mentioned it, they only recalled it as something that happened a long time ago. The power of the carefree heavenly sovereign is truly both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Even as someone who personally witnessed the event, Li Fan's own memory of it had started to blur. Fortunately, with the secret technique transformation of the divine Tao, he could constantly remind himself of the truth. Currently, the hottest topic in the 10,000 Immortal Alliance was not the destruction of Kongyan but rather the sudden emergence of a group of mysterious cultivators from the white mist. These attackers looted and destroyed without restraint. They came and went like the wind, highly trained, and seemed to be extremely familiar with the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. They specifically targeted strongholds and fortresses rich in special resources. Moreover, they never engaged in prolonged battles. As soon as reinforcements arrived, they would immediately retreat into the white mist. The Samantabhadra true boat, which could greatly reduce the corrosive effects of the devouring essence white mist, was still a rare item within the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. Not every cultivator had access to one. As a result, they could only watch helplessly as these raiders vanished into the mist. What? Chase them down at all costs? Fellow Taoist, how much is your yearly salary? Why would you risk your life for this? Just report it, and let the officials handle it. As a result, in no time, the headquarters of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance was flooded with reports of attacks from various regions. Naturally, the Alliance was furious. Since the establishment of its dominance over half of the Xuanwang realm, it had never experienced such blatant humiliation on its own territory. In response, they dispatched specialized cultivators to investigate the attack locations. However, the attackers were incredibly experienced, leaving behind no traces or evidence. Instead, they simply avoided the areas where investigation teams were stationed and continued their attacks elsewhere, striking like phantoms. Such open provocation completely enraged the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. Squads of black-clad cultivators, brimming with killing intent, were transported to various regions via teleportation formation. They vowed to capture these criminals at all costs. Yet, after this large-scale deployment, the raiders vanished entirely, as if they had never existed. The 10,000 Immortal Alliance had prepared extensively, only to punch empty air. It was beyond frustrating. Eventually, they had no choice but to continue patrols in various regions for a while. After capturing a few suspicious rogue cultivators as scapegoats, they hastily concluded the operation. As for the true identities of these raiders, the first suspect in the eyes of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance was naturally the Five Elders Association. However, accusations of this magnitude required evidence, especially since such claims could easily reignite a war between the two factions. Before the 10,000 Immortal Alliance could make any statement, the Five Elders Association had already spoken. They expressed regret and sympathy for the attack suffered within the 10,000 Immortal Alliance's territory. Furthermore, they proposed, in the spirit of the mutual agreement for peaceful coexistence, that if the 10,000 Immortal Alliance had any difficulties handling the matter, the Five Elders Association could send specialists to assist in the investigation. There was no way the 10,000 Immortal Alliance would agree to this. They strongly suspected that the attacks had been orchestrated by the Five Elders Association, who were now feigning concern just to further discuss them. However, since they had not been able to find any conclusive evidence, the 10,000 Immortal Alliance could do nothing but silently suffer the loss. Not only could they not retaliate against the Five Elders Association, but they also had to begrudgingly express gratitude for their concern. In this round of confrontation, the 10,000 Immortal Alliance suffered a complete defeat. As a direct consequence, the Alliance started taking the Samantabhadra true boat, which could freely traverse the White Mist, much more seriously. Orders were issued requiring every province to be equipped with a sufficient number of these vessels, along with regular patrols by cultivators outside the White Mist barrier to guard against future sneak attacks. To prevent another ambush, this, in turn, led to a short-term surge in the price of Samantabhadra true leaves, which had long remained at a low value. Those cultivators who had been trapped in their investments finally made a significant recovery. Since they rule through contracts, it seems that the Five Elders Association does keep their word, someone remarked. But they've also gained quite a lot this time. Scanning through the estimated property losses circulated privately among the people, Li Fan smiled and thought to himself. With such a dramatic event, the matters of Kongyansi are nearly forgotten. Probably in another year, once the atmosphere calms down, I can gradually send the disciples of Medicine King sect back to the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. Letting out a deep breath, Li Fan adjusted himself to his optimal state before stepping into the newly constructed sect's main hall within the valley. He performed a talisman seal, activating the entrance to the underground secluded chamber beneath the main hall, and then sealed the doorway behind him. Taking out an ice blue pill, it was none other than Lu San's refined, supreme emotionless pill. Li Fan consumed it. A familiar sensation surged through him as he initiated the ritual. Blessings to the celestial Venerable of Xuanwang. He muttered softly. The next moment, a slight dizziness washed over him. However, unlike before, he did not immediately enter the fallen immortal realm. Instead, it felt as though he had arrived in a distorted transparent bubble. In front of him, two constantly flickering scenes appeared. Both were familiar to Li Fan. One was Ningyuan's longevity fruit and the other was the beast-taming sect's upheaval, both events he had previously experienced in the fallen immortal realm. So, I can freely choose which scene to enter. Is this the effect of the Xuanwang Immortal Heart mantra? Li Fan mused. Without much hesitation, he chose to return to the beast-taming sect's upheaval scene. In an instant, the light and shadow in front of him surged toward him. The surroundings became clearer. Sigh, I wonder when senior brother Luya will return. A slightly dejected voice from Shu Ke reached Li Fan's ears. Under the instinctive power of his possessed body, Li Fan struck Shu Ke with a claw. Memories flooded into his mind naturally. Since their return to the beast-taming sect from the sacred beast mountain of Nanming, Li Fan and Shu Ke had learned that both Emperor Sanmo and senior brother Luya had gone out on important matters and were nowhere to be found. As a result, the rewards promised for their mission could not be fulfilled, which Shu Ke had been complaining about ever since. Of course, in Li Fan's view, Shu Ke's concern stemmed more from his pure longing for senior brother Luya. After all, both were orphans from the Xuantian temple in Ningyuan City and had joined the beast-taming sect together. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were like family, relying on each other for survival. Ignoring Shu Ke's grumbling, Li Fan closed his eyes and focused on cultivating the creation furnace technique. It was indeed a perfect technique, modified by Mr. Bai himself. Ever since he had begun cultivating it, not only had his physical body become increasingly powerful, but his essence, energy, and spirit had also surged daily. Even if he stayed awake for days without rest, he wouldn't feel the slightest fatigue. More importantly, his heavenly fate blackbird bloodline seemed to have become purer. Li Fan's originally jet black feathers now occasionally reflected a seven-colored radiance under the sunlight, making him appear extraordinarily majestic. Even Shu Ke couldn't help but reach out to touch them from time to time, only to be ruthlessly swatted away by Li Fan. The enhancement of his bloodline brought comprehensive improvements to his abilities. His divine ability, the mandate of heaven is mine, was now wielded with increasing ease, nourishing Shu Ke's fortune while simultaneously reinforcing his own. By now, Li Fan had reached the first major breakthrough recorded in his inherited memories. He could form a mandate domain within a certain range around himself. This not only allowed him to foresee and avoid danger but also to use destiny itself as a weapon against his enemies. This was an extraordinary feat. Among the Heavenly Fate Blackbird clan, only adult Blackbird over 100 years old could typically achieve this. Yet, Li Fan had hatched less than 5 years ago. He was still a fledgling. Breaking the growth limitations of spirit beasts demonstrated just how extraordinary Mr. Bai's creation furnace technique truly was. After returning from the fallen immortal realm, everything besides the rewards for fulfilling obsessions will be forgotten, including all learned techniques. I wonder, with the support of the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, will this rule be altered? Li Fan pondered in silence, immersing himself in the mysteries of the creation furnace technique. Even if he couldn't bring the technique back to reality, the countless insights gained from cultivating it were already immensely beneficial. Thus, even though the storyline of the fallen immortal realm had yet to progress, he remained entirely unbothered, dedicating himself fully to cultivation every day. Time passed. On this particular day, deep in meditation, Li Fan suddenly jolted awake. A wave of unease surged through his heart, and he instinctively looked up at the sky. Although the sky remained clear and boundless, Li Fan could see an overwhelming aura of death and slaughter spreading across the heavens. It had almost materialized into a tangible force, rolling like dark clouds, shrouding the entire sky. The oppressive presence was suffocating, terrifying. The Tao technique cannot be cultivated in parallel. A sudden realization struck Li Fan. Before long, panicked cries erupted from all over the beast-taming sect. What's going on? The beast control technique, why does the sect have exactly 36,482 practitioners? No matter how I circulate my cultivation technique, I can't gain any more spiritual power. This is absurd, the calamity of incompatible cultivation technique. For the beast-taming sect, which primarily cultivates only the beast control technique, was nearly catastrophic. Almost everyone could foresee that once countless cultivators were trapped at their current cultivation level, with their lifespan nearing its end, they would resort to extreme measures in a desperate attempt to survive. As a result, the disciples of the beast-taming sect fell into a state of immense panic. In an instant, they distanced themselves from one another, their eyes filled with suspicion toward the senior and junior brothers and sisters they once held dear. For now, due to the lingering rationality and conscience of the disciples, no one had resorted to violence. Even with the sect master and the elders personally stepping forward to calm the situation, they were unable to halt the spread of fear that continued to fester within the sect. Gradually, some disciples could no longer endure the pressure and began to secretly flee. Meanwhile, others, pushed to their mental limits, had bloodshot eyes and showed signs of hysteria. It was like a powder keg, ready to be ignited by a single stray spark. At this critical moment, Emperor Sanmo and Luya returned. Did you bring it back? Upon seeing Shu Ke, Luya was the first to ask. His expression was calm, showing no trace of panic. Shu Ke nodded, reaching into the beast pouch in his robe and retrieving a small, slumbering flesh-like creature. This was the peculiar exotic beast gifted by Emperor Yi, a creature capable of self-division and reproduction. Upon seeing it, Luya's expression lightened with joy. He carefully took the small creature, examining it closely for a moment before finally breathing a sigh of relief. Senior brother Lu, what exactly is this little thing for? Why are you so anxious about it? Shu Ke asked curiously. He knew that Luya was always composed and rarely revealed his emotions, making his reaction particularly unusual this time. Hey, this is our hope for overcoming this calamity, Luya replied, his eyes flickering with an indiscernible emotion. This thing, Shu Ke's eyes widened in disbelief. You'll understand in due time, Luya said before hastily departing, leaving behind a bewildered Shu Ke and a thoughtful Li Fan. 3 days later, the beast-taming sect master convened a grand sect meeting to address the calamity that had descended upon the world and to announce a series of plans. To prevent mutual slaughter caused by the incompatibility of cultivation techniques, the sect master took the lead in dispersing the beast control technique, requiring all disciples to follow suit, retaining only their cultivation base. The entire beast-taming sect would evacuate from the main world of Xuanwang in batches, relocating to designated small pocket realms for refuge. Since the strength of beast-taming sect cultivators primarily lay in the spirit beasts they controlled, dispersing their own cultivation techniques would not significantly weaken their actual combat ability. Though slightly affected, they could still fight effectively. Moreover, the spirit beasts raised by the disciples were carefully nurtured from birth, forming deep bonds with their masters. Even without the beast control technique, the disciples could still command their beasts. This plan successfully averted the danger of internal conflict, so there was little opposition. Those who initially refused eventually relented once the sect master personally led by example. As for how they could disperse their techniques without affecting their cultivation base, Li Fan watched as Shu Ke muttered incantations, and in an instant, his entire cultivation technique dissipated, leaving behind a purely refined cultivation base stored in his dantian. The supreme primordial true scripture. Having seen this method before, Li Fan immediately recognized the technique used by the beast-taming sect. But they only explained how to operate it, without mentioning its origin. What's going on? As far as I remember, the event where the immortal ancestor forcefully seized the supreme primordial true scripture hasn't happened yet. So where did the beast-taming sect obtain this technique? In that instant, a white-robed figure surfaced in Li Fan's mind. Could it be him? TL. Changed Emperor 1 to Emperor Yi as it is more appropriate. The supreme primordial true scripture is a secret art never passed down by the supreme sect. How could Mr. Bai possibly know it? Could it be that, just like the immortal ancestor, it was forcibly seized? But that's something only immortal ancestor could do after defying the heavens and achieving the longevity immortal heavenly sovereign realm. Although Mr. Bai is strong, he doesn't seem to have reached the longevity immortal realm yet, right? A surge of doubt arose in Li Fan's heart. Meanwhile, within this brief moment, Shu Ke had already dissipated the energy of his own beast control technique. Xiao He, look, this is amazing. My cultivation is really still within my dantian. Shu Ke excitedly shouted toward Li Fan. Hearing Shu Ke's words, Li Fan no longer felt the same sense of closeness as before. Instead, a flash of blood red flickered across his eyes, and a sudden surge of violent intent arose within him. Driven by instinct, he almost tore the noisy little creature before him into pieces. Fortunately, the one controlling this body now was not the black bird itself but Li Fan. So, after just a brief moment, he regained his composure. Shu Ke remained completely unaware that he had just brushed past death's door. Instead, he foolishly rushed forward, patting and touching Li Fan in concern. Xiao He, what's wrong? You looked so scary just now. It's best if you stay away from me for now. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to hold back next time. Li Fan cast a sidelong glance at Shu Ke, warning him. As if to confirm Li Fan's words, the beast control sect was suddenly filled with the sounds of ferocious beast roars and the anguished screams of cultivators. We are inherently ferocious by nature and see humans as mere food. It was only the beast control technique that suppressed our instincts before. Now that the restraints have suddenly disappeared, those beasts who have been with their masters for a long time might still have some lingering attachment. But for those that were only recently tamed by ordinary disciples, they will likely turn on their former masters the moment they regain their freedom. Li Fan stated coldly. The disciples' desperate screams continued to echo. Shu Ke glanced outside, seemingly catching sight of the bloody scene, and his face turned pale. This is terrifying. How could the sect leader and the others not have foreseen this? Then, as if switching moods in an instant, he put on his usual playful grin and moved closer. But I've always treated you well, Xiao He. I should be safe, right? Li Fan remained silent as he felt the violent energy within him. Though temporarily suppressed, it hadn't dissipated at all. At any moment, it could erupt again. It was at this moment that he finally understood why, according to history, Xiao He would eventually part ways with Shu Ke. Just as he had explained earlier, the nature of demonic beasts is inherently savage, making peaceful coexistence with humans difficult. Even if a bond forms through years of companionship, suppressing their killing instincts time and time again, those instincts will continue to accumulate. One day, when they can no longer be restrained, that so-called bond will prove to be as fragile as paper. Moreover, the vast power disparity between demonic beasts and the disciples of the beast control sect meant that if such a loss of control occurred, the cultivators would be left with only one fate, death. Could this be the root of the beast control sect's great upheaval? Because the heavenly fate Blackbird, Xiao He, was unable to control his murderous instincts, he ultimately parted ways with his master Shu Ke, never to meet again. If that's the case, then perhaps this time, there is a way to resolve its obsession. A thought suddenly surfaced in Li Fan's mind. With the Xuanwang immortal heart mantra within him, Li Fan's self-control far surpassed that of any demonic beast. He was confident that, no matter how violently the murderous intent surged like a raging tide, his willpower would remain an unbreakable dam, keeping it tightly sealed. As his thoughts shifted, Li Fan chose not to answer Shu Ke's question directly. Instead, he sneered, "That Emperor Sanmo claims to be a beast of supreme wisdom. With him around, how could he not have considered this exact outcome?" Then still, upon hearing this, Shu Ke's eyes widened in shock. The great calamity has just begun, and one of the 10 great immortal sects, the beast-taming sect, is already preparing to flee. If word of this spreads, what a devastating blow it would be to the cultivators of the world. The other sects among the 10 great immortal sects will most likely not agree to such an act and will surely step forward to obstruct it. Naturally, the cultivation world of the Xuanwang realm must be given an explanation. Since the Tao technique cannot be cultivated together, disciples have turned against each other, and the sect has suffered heavy losses. What then? After all, the overwhelming stench of blood covering the ground is no illusion. This also serves as a perfect cover for evacuating the small world, Li Fan stated matter-of-factly. Shu Ke involuntarily shivered. "My lord, your mind is truly terrifying." Then, he stared at Li Fan, his face full of doubt. "But, Xiao He, since when did you become so clever? Did you secretly consume some kind of rare heavenly treasure again? That shouldn't be possible, I've been keeping an eye on you the entire time." Hearing Shu Ke's words, a surge of violent killing intent arose within Li Fan. He ruthlessly swiped a claw at him to vent a little of his fury before slowly suppressing it. The turmoil within the beast-taming sect lasted for 3 to 4 days. Although many lower-level disciples were killed or injured, the rampaging spirit beasts were soon recaptured and imprisoned. Meanwhile, the core strength of the sect, including elite disciples and various elders, remained largely unaffected. The plan to evacuate from the Xuanwang realm was proceeding in an orderly manner. During this process, Li Fan also picked up snippets of conversation among the disciples, which revealed another pressing reason for the beast-taming sect's desperate retreat, to prevent the spirit beasts from seeking vengeance. If spirit beasts and humans were two distinct races competing for survival resources, then the relationship between the beast-taming sect and spirit beasts was one of absolute enmity and irreconcilable conflict. Spirit beasts were inherently proud, considering their status to be far above that of mere humans. Yet, the beast-taming sect had used despicable means to enslave and subjugate them, a disgraceful humiliation in the eyes of the spirit beasts. In the past, the beast-taming sect was located deep within human territory, and many of the captured and controlled powerful spirit beasts remained within its ranks. Thus, even if some spirit beasts harbored thoughts of revenge, they were largely powerless to act. On the contrary, they ran the risk of being captured and enslaved themselves. But the present was no longer the past. With the arrival of the Tao cannot be cultivated together calamity, word would inevitably reach the spirit beasts before long. Known for their vengeful nature, the spirit beasts would never let such an opportunity slip by. They would undoubtedly come seeking retribution. Leaving aside whether the beast-taming sect could withstand the onslaught of the vengeful spirit beasts, once the battle began in earnest, it was uncertain which side the sect's own captured spirit beasts would ultimately take. To prevent such a dreadful scenario from occurring, relocating to a safe haven had become an urgent priority. All disciples of the beast-taming sect, hear this: only spirit beasts that pass the trial of the heart-linking ring shall be permitted to evacuate with us. Those who fail shall be set free. Soon, this announcement spread throughout the entire beast-taming sect. The so-called heart-linking ring was a mystical artifact personally crafted by Emperor Sanmo. At first glance, it appeared as a circular doorway radiating a blue glow. When a beast passed through it, only an instant would pass in the real world. However, in that fleeting moment, the beast would experience countless lifelike illusionary realms, indistinguishable from reality. The heart-linking test aimed to assess whether a beast would ever act against its master under extreme circumstances. Forging this heart-linking ring, was no easy task, and in their haste, the beast-taming sect managed to create only one. Although the test itself took very little time, the sheer number of beasts in the sect was overwhelming. It wasn't just the personal spirit beasts of the disciples, there were also beasts used for labor, tending spirit fields, and guarding the sect, an entire horde of masterless beasts. Although they were called masterless, these beasts were all enslaved under the rule of the beast-taming sect. The key to their control was the sect's supreme treasure, the 10,000 Beasts Reincarnation Wheel. It was said that this wheel bore engravings of nearly every known beast in existence. Even when a new species of beast emerged, its image would soon appear on the wheel. From the moment a beast was born, the 10,000 Beasts Reincarnation Wheel would imprint a brand upon its soul, binding it for eternity, ensuring that it could never escape the wheel's control. It was said that this treasure had originally been brought from the Nanming sacred beast mountain by Emperor Sanmo and given to the sect's founding ancestor, Wan Xiong. It was from the 10,000 Beasts Reincarnation Wheel that Wan Xiong comprehended the profound true art of beast control. However, despite its incredible abilities, the 10,000 Beasts Reincarnation Wheel had several fatal flaws. It could only be used on newborn beasts. Additionally, any beast imprinted with its brand would suffer excruciating, never-ending pain, known as the agony of the wheel. This agony severely stunted their intelligence, making them capable of only the simplest tasks. True beast taming required perfect synchronization between beast and master. Only then could a tamer wield their beast as effortlessly as an extension of their own body, maximizing combat potential. In battle, even the smallest details could determine victory or defeat. If a controlled beast lacked intelligence, it was as good as fighting with one arm tied behind one's back. Thus, beast-taming sect cultivators used the true art of beast control to nurture their life-bound spirit beasts from a young age. They never considered relying on the beasts controlled by the 10,000 Beasts Reincarnation Wheel. This also led to the beast-taming sect suddenly falling into an extremely difficult situation after the great calamity of the inability to cultivate the same Tao technique descended. Fortunately, the evacuation was personally overseen by Emperor Sanmo. Under the gaze of this long-browed, white-haired elder, neither man nor beast dared to disobey. The heart-linking ring test was carried out in an orderly manner. By the end of the first day, only 1/10 of the beasts had been tested. At this rate, the selection process would take nearly half a month to complete. Beasts that passed the test were reunited with their masters, shedding tears of relief, and were the first to board the 10,000 Beasts Ark. Soon, they would embark on this flying artifact, leaving the Xuanwang realm to seek refuge in an unknown minor world. As for the beasts that failed the test, no matter how much their masters wished otherwise, they were forcibly separated. It was said that these beasts would be temporarily imprisoned and later released after the beast-taming sect had fully evacuated. On the 7th day of testing, that night, Shu Ke, who had been absent all day, suddenly appeared before Li Fan, his face full of panic. "Xiao He, this is bad. You need to get out of here, now." Li Fan, who was meditating and cultivating the creation furnace technique, opened his eyes, glanced at him indifferently, and remained unmoved. Shu Ke continued urgently, "This time, I'm not joking. If you stay here, you'll really die. Forget about me, just leave the beast-taming sect quietly." Li Fan yawned, stretching his mouth. Shu Ke became even more anxious. "Xiao He, did you even hear what I just said? Today, I overheard senior brother Lu Ya saying that the beasts who fail the test won't actually be set free as promised, but will instead be executed. Isn't that right?" Li Fan interrupted. Shu Ke froze. How do you know? Did you eavesdrop on our conversation?" A trace of shock flashed across Shu Ke's face. Li Fan scoffed, raising his head arrogantly. "You don't need to eavesdrop to figure that out, it's just common sense. Think about it. These beasts, once belonging to the beast-taming sect, know countless sect secrets. The evacuation of the Xuanwang realm is a matter of life and death for the sect. If word gets out, who can guarantee that these beasts won't lead pursuers to the minor world? If that happens, there will be no escape, it would be total annihilation. That Emperor Sanmo is no kind-hearted, merciful figure. Anyone who could hand over a method for enslaving his own kin to the humans," a dangerous glint flickered in Li Fan's eyes. "In short, these beasts must all die," Li Fan declared coldly, his words firm and unwavering. After a long time, Shu Ke finally reacted. He stared blankly at Li Fan and asked, "Since you've figured everything out, Xiao He, why are you still so calm? Aren't you afraid?" Li Fan stood tall, staring intently at Shu Ke, pressing him. What a joke. Why would I be afraid? Do you really think I wouldn't pass that so-called heart-linking ring test? Do you have so little confidence in me? Overwhelmed by Li Fan's imposing aura, Shu Kei couldn't even meet his gaze. He stammered, that's not what I meant, nothing in life is absolute. What if? Li Fan flapped his wings and flew over Shu Kei's head, landing a fierce claw strike. There is no, what if? He declared firmly. Shu Kei hesitated, wanting to say more. Although he was deeply worried, he knew this stubborn bird's temperament all too well, so he refrained from further persuasion. 3 anxious days passed, and finally, the day arrived for Xiaohei to undergo the test. Under the intense and watchful eyes of those around, Li Fan stepped into the heart-linking ring. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. In the next instant, the heart-linking ring burst into a gentle blue glow, a sign of successfully passing the test. Ah, Xiaohei, you're amazing. Shu Kei shrieked and rushed forward, attempting to hug Li Fan tightly, only to be ruthlessly kicked away by a sharp claw. The test is complete. Next, Lu Ya announced, glancing at Li Fan with slight surprise. 5 days later, after all the spirit beasts of the beast-taming sect had completed the heart-linking ring test, the 10,000 beast ark was filled to the brim. It was finally ready to set sail towards an unknown homeland. Senior brother Lu Ya, aren't you coming? On the deck, Shu Kei curiously looked at Lu Ya, who stood at the bow of the ship, tilting his head as he asked. Lu Ya reached out and patted Shu Kei's head. Some people have to stay behind. The 10 great immortal sects still care about appearances. If they don't even bother to put on a show, it wouldn't be good to provoke unnecessary trouble. Shu Kei nodded in half understanding. Go on. The future of the beast-taming sect depends on you now. Tying a red string around Shu Kei's right wrist, Lu Ya spoke with a hint of reluctance in his eyes. Wow, this is a red string woven by Mr. Bai. Shu Kei immediately recognized the unique knotting style. Back when they were still in the abandoned temple of Ningyuan City, every time Mr. Bai cured a sick child, he would tie such a red string around their wrist, praying for their future safety and well-being. Shu Kei raised his hand, staring at the red string, inspecting it closely over and over again. Li Fan also fixed his gaze on the red string, an indescribable feeling stirring in his heart.